Hey Gussie, how are you all? Welcome back to MYC Hanel. Today we will see what if Naruto Overpowered possessed two magics Narukarin. If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments. Several figures waited under a giant wooden gate awaiting the final member of the team they sent after their lost ally. One in particular was worried. After all, she has had a crush on the boy since before she graduated the academy. Her pink hair flowed around her shoulders while she clutched the gate for support, letting out a single tear as she remembered the last time she talked to her crush. Flashback. Konoha main gate. The pink-haired girl sat on a bench, lost in her thoughts of the events that transpired that day. Naruto baka, always trying to get one up on Sasuke-kun. I don't even know why he tries. He'll never be as cool as Sasuke-kun, but he tried to kill him. I wish he would just leave, that way he would stop bugging me and let me have my love. The girl sighed dreamily as she thought of her teammate Sasuke. She didn't know what it was that drew her to him, be it his mysterious personality, or the way he acts so cool. She just couldn't help it, but whenever Naruto talked to her or did something stupid or embarrassing, it irked her beyond belief. She was interrupted from her thoughts when she caught sight of her favorite Uchiha, causing her to call out to him girlishly, "Sasuke-kun. Where are you going?" Sasuke turned his head to look at her with a haunted expression before responding, "I'm leaving. This place can't give me the power I need to kill him, so I'm going to the one person who can give me what I want." Sakura looked at him in horror with her hand covering her mouth with a gasp. "Sasuke? You can't be serious, that snake is who you're going to." "What about me?" Sasuke looked at her with emotionless eyes. "You mean nothing to me, you're too weak to stand by my side. Go to the dope, I'm sure he would welcome you." Sakura's heart shattered at hearing his words and tears threatened to spill before she spoke up. "If you go, I'll scream and everyone will come running." Sasuke perked up before turning to face her, but while Sakura closed her eyes and let out a breath of relief thinking she had won, her eyes shot open when she felt something impact painfully in her stomach. She saw Sasuke in front of her. Sasuke leaned forward and whispered in her ear, "Sakura, thank you, I'm sorry." With his piece set, he felt her slump against his shoulder, indicating she was knocked unconscious. He picked her up bridal style and laid her on the bench they were standing next to and took off out the gate, disappearing down the road. Flashback end. Sakura was brought from her thoughts when she saw a speck coming towards them. Sakura was happy. She felt that Naruto had succeeded in his promise. He had brought Sasuke back to her. She wanted to run to him, she wanted to thank him for bringing him back, but she stopped when she noticed the figure fall forward. She ran to the figure and began to feel dread when she saw it was only a single figure. Naruto was walking back home from his failed mission with a fist-sized hole in his chest, constantly leaking blood while his wound glowed, trying to heal and causing the blood to harden into scabs. He remembered he had seen his sensei arrive just as Sasuke left. Flashback. Valley of the End. Naruto saw Kakashi look towards Naruto and then in the direction Sasuke ran and dash off, leaving Naruto on the ground bleeding out, slowly losing conscious with only one thought in mind. Why? Before everything faded to black. After Kakashi left, red energy worked overtime on his wounds, causing Naruto's features to take on a more demonic nature. The whisker marks on his cheeks darkened while his eyes turned a blood red with black slit pupils, and his sun-kissed hair split at the tips. Naruto shakily stood up while trying to cover the hole in his chest and began walking down the dirt road. Every step hurt. His chest was burning and soaked in his blood, running down his orange jumpsuit, tainting it crimson. Naruto hadn't made it far from the beach he woke up on when a booming voice echoed through the valley. "Why did you stay? Why did you fight? Why did you give so much for that village and Uchiha? None of them care except that Senju and her apprentice." Naruto looked around, still clutching his chest, painfully looking for the source, straining his muscles in his chest. "Who are you? Where are you?" Naruto only got a deep chuckle of amusement in return. "Show yourself." Naruto suddenly felt an immensely powerful pressure behind him, causing him to turn and look upon a deep-tanned man about 6'4", dirty blonde hair that reached the base of his neck. Even from the distance Naruto could see the man's eyes rotating like a vortex of dark emerald green, while he wore a simple deep blue kimono with carefully designed wave stitching that seemed to reflect the picture of the ocean from high above, watching the waves rage. The man had his arms crossed over his chest with his eyes looking Naruto over. The man stood on a column of water. "Well boy, what is your purpose for going to such great lengths?" Surely you must have seen it by now. Even with that mask of idiocy you wear, it's fairly obvious to anyone paying attention you're much smarter than you let on. So why? His lips never moved, but the water resonated as the apparent source. I fight for acceptance. I found a brother in Sasuke and I don't want to lose the little family I have. The figure pondered Naruto's words before a small smile graced his lips. You are a very interesting boy, Naruto Uzumaki. The god chuckled at his tense form. I have been watching you for some time now, Naruto. My name is Oceanus, Kami of the Sea. I have come to offer you a chance to start over, to have the family that you wanted so badly. But know this, if you accept my offer, your travel here will be severely limited. There is only one time every couple months the barrier separating this world and mine is weak enough to travel through. Although it can be used multiple times by other creatures, there is a 5-minute interval you must step through before it closes, or you will have to wait for the next one. Naruto looked at him skeptically. A god? You said so yourself. I'm not as stupid as everyone thinks I am. So why do you think you can call yourself a god without me questioning you? I cannot prove anything, I simply ask you trust me. I know it is difficult with the life you were forced to endure, but every choice has its consequences. Whether those consequences benefit us or harm us is always unknown until it comes to pass. But the greatest events in history have always started with a decision. I will await yours in Nami no Kuni. My portal will close in 5 days, so make your way there if you wish to learn. I will wait on the landmark of your first achievement. Naruto took the man's words in stride. So far he hasn't lied to him, so why shouldn't he trust him? If he wanted him dead, it would have been fairly easy with the fist-sized hole in his chest, not to mention he's been having similar thoughts about his friends recently. When was the last time they visited him while he was in the hospital? Or even hung out with him outside of missions? Has any of them even bothered to stop by his house to say a quick hello? He had a lot to think over, and the walk home, no matter how painful, may help him. As Naruto continued to trudge down the road, Naruto thought back to his past experiences with his friends. The most he can remember doing with any of them is the occasional gathering of the Rookie 12, and even with that people would brush him off to talk to someone else. Whenever he tried to talk to Sakura, she would hit him and call him a baka. Ino would simply ignore him. Shikamaru was always asleep or thought it was too troublesome to talk. Choji would be too indulged in talking to either Asuma or Shikamaru, or stuffing his face. Kiba and Lee would be roughhousing. Kakashi would be indulged in his smut. Neji just ignores everyone. Tenten tries to get Neji's attention. Shino, Hinata, and Sasuke just wouldn't come because of either shyness being Hinata's case or brooding being Sasuke and Shino. Around that time Guy is either running around the village training, talking to Kakashi, or hugging Lee about youth. All in all, are they even friends? The more he thought about the times he spent with them, the more his heart seemed to shatter. The only people he can think of that actually seemed to care are Tsunade and Shizune, but they are always stuck in the office. He would like to think his sensei Jiraiya cared, but he always has his nose in a peephole at the hot springs peeping on the woman. The Ichirakus he considered family. His heart finally couldn't take it anymore, and he finally felt it shatter. He was alone, he had no one. His thoughts became clear, but his body refused to move. He finally collapsed, the pain in his chest gone, his mind in turmoil, his emotions running rampant in his eyes. He just lie there, watching a pink blur rush up to him. Flashback end. Sakura kneeled over her blonde-haired teammate checking his pulse. She sighed in relief when she felt his heartbeat. She saw his eyes open, looking at her utterly emotionless. Naruto, where's Sasuke-kun? The last thing she expected was to feel the massive ki focused on her, and when Naruto rose to his feet she saw something in his blue eyes that screamed betrayal. I have a hole in my chest, broken ribs, punctured lung, and the one thing you ask me when I collapse is where is Sasuke-kun? Naruto glared at her hatefully before walking off, leaving a shaking Sakura. Sakura stood up shakily and glared at his back. Yes, now where is Hibaka? Naruto stopped again with his fists clenched tight enough to draw blood. Naruto turned to reveal crimson eyes glowing under the shadow of his hair. Naruto snarled like an animal and spat. He made it to Orochimaru. At this point he could burn in hell for all I care, and you can join him. Naruto didn't notice the group of shocked people who had heard him until he turned to face them. He spoke in such a cold way that everyone trembled. Get out of my way or I'll move you myself. Everyone parted for him. The majority of the Rookie 12 stared as he walked by, mostly of fear. Naruto reached the gates and smiled softly at Tsunade and Shizune, who ran to him. Naruto's body finally failed. He fell forward but was caught by Tsunade. She quickly took off towards the hospital with Shizune hot on her heels. Tsunade rushed through the doors to the hospital and immediately went into the. She spent the remainder of the day and most of the night doing what she could to keep him alive. Mindscape. Naruto finds himself in front of his tenant locked away in his cage. "What do you want this time, Kyuubi? I'm having a bad day and I just want to rest." The Kyuubi growled, glaring down at him. "I was going to congratulate you on finally finding your senses and finally seeing through those lies you so blatantly believed. But now let's discuss your conversation with Oceanus. I guess, but I don't want to leave Ba-chan and Shizune Ni-chan, it would hurt them." Kyuubi sighed while lowering his head. "I can't say I understand, being immortal makes forming bonds a hindrance instead of a strength. But just do what you've always done, kid." Naruto quirked an eyebrow. "What might that be?" "You've always charged in head first. People call it stupidity, but the reason you're still alive is because you followed your heart." Naruto allowed a short laugh to ring through the sewer before wiping a tear from his eye. "I never took you as one for poetry. But all jokes aside, thanks Kyuubi." Kyuubi scoffed while lazily opening an eye. "Don't get used to it, I'm only helping you because it's in my best interest to get stronger. And the only way to get that strength is to go to Oceanus. Now leave, I want to sleep." Naruto faded from the mindscape without seeing a grin spread across Kyuubi's face. Naruto awoke to pain in his chest. He couldn't move, his arms and legs were restrained. Naruto struggled against the binding but found he couldn't break them. The heartbeat monitor quickly responded to the slight panic he felt and soon Shizune walked into the room. "Calm down, Naruto-kun. We just did this so you wouldn't run off again." Naruto felt himself relax slightly, allowing his head to rest on the pillow. "How long was I out?" "About 3 days, you still need to recover but you should be cleared tomorrow afternoon." Naruto looked at her irritated. "I can't do that, I need to go now." Shizune tilted her head in confusion. "Why?" Naruto sighed. "It's a long story and I don't want to repeat it. Let's just say I was offered a deal I can't refuse anymore." Shizune narrowed her eyes in suspicion. "Naruto-u." Shizune's voice rising signaled he hadn't made the right choice in saying that. "Ma, Ni-chan, just please, trust me on this, it's not something easy to believe. Besides, what I want to do is get stronger and this is the only way I can see to get the strength to bring an end to the snake." Shizune didn't look pleased by his answer so tapped her foot impatiently while Naruto sighed. "Fine, it was after I saw Kakashi leave me behind." Naruto goes into detail of his encounter with Oceanus. He tells her about his doubts about his so-called friends. He explains his reasons why he doubts them, and as much as Shizune wanted to tell him he was wrong, the fact was that no one had asked if he was okay when he was brought in, proving his doubts true. "It doesn't mean you have to leave, Naruto. It just means that they're ungrateful for everything you've done even if they don't know everything. There are still people who care about you, me and Tsunade care, you can't doubt that." Naruto replied with a small smile. "Yeah, I know, the Ichirakus would count too, but it's always business with them. It's hard to tell if they're being sincere or if they're just doing their job." "True, but Naruto, you can't leave. What about your promise to Lady Tsunade of taking the Hokage hat? Not to mention your promise to bring Sasuke back." Naruto scoffed at the end and faced the window. "Please, I couldn't care less about the Teme at this point. If he was a little more accurate he would have stabbed me right through the heart, I would have died." Shizune couldn't refute his claim and was desperately trying to think of a way to get him to stay until she remembered her master's talk with Jiraiya. "Naruto, Jiraiya is wanting to take you on a 3-year training trip around the elemental nations. If you go you can get stronger." Naruto looked odd. His lips twitched upward and quivered like he was trying to not laugh, but it was in vain as the dam broke. "Let me get this straight. You think sending me with the self-proclaimed super pervert, who mind you can't stop writing his smut, peeking on women, hitting on women, and going to brothels for a single day would be a good idea? I'd be alone overall 8 times out of 10, so why would I agree to this?" Shizune's brain was momentarily fried. Now that she thought about it, the entire thing is laughable the way Naruto put it. Seriously, what were they thinking? If anything, it would have been a huge waste of time even thinking about it. "I'll be right back." Shizune walked out the door towards Tsunade's office. Naruto let out a sigh while he lay in bed. He knew they wouldn't let him go. it would be wishful thinking if he did. Naruto needed to get out of here and he knew it had to be soon if he was going to reach wave any time before the deadline, so he needed to think. He had heard how chakra could be used in a multitude of ways, from forming normal jutsu, elemental jutsu, walking on surfaces, and enhancing body parts. But he didn't know how to do any of those, courtesy of our least favorite emo lover. So how? Kit, I'm only going to say this once. Channel your chakra into the muscles of your right arm and imagine them hardening. That should get you out of this problem. Why are you helping me? I thought you only help when it benefits you. This does benefit me. As loath as I am to say it, you're right about the pervert. It would be a waste of precious time you could use to get stronger. The stronger you are, the least likely you are to die in battle, giving me time to break out of this kami-forsaken seal. Fine then, temporary truce, let's get started then. With that, Naruto did as the fox instructed and pulled with all his might until the bindings snapped under the pressure. Naruto used his free arm to undo the other restraints and pulled out the heartbeat monitor he was connected to, causing a resounding beep to ring through the room. Naruto took action and jumped out the window and headed towards the main gate. Naruto had incredibly fast healing, but even after his major wounds healed, it still hurt his sore muscles from the impact of jumping out of the second floor of the hospital. Naruto jumped from rooftop to rooftop to avoid the crowds of people swarming the streets of the market district. Naruto was solely focused on getting out of the village, so he didn't notice the dark blue hair of the girl who was tailing him. Upon reaching the gate, he was stopped by a pair of familiar white eyes that gazed into his sapphire. "Hinata? What are you doing here?" The girl shifted uncomfortably under his gaze. "Naruto, where are you going? You should be resting." Naruto groaned in frustration. "Listen Hinata, I have to leave. I just can't stay here anymore. I know that you and the rest of Rookie 12 don't like me, so just let me go." Hinata's face showed slight panic. "What? Who told you something like that? It doesn't matter, let me go. I lost what little love for this village I had when I started to see how my so-called friends acted around me. When was the last time anyone came to see me in the hospital after a mission? Oh wait, you can't. 'Cause you never did, so get out of my way. I'm leaving and it'll take Cammy herself to stop me." Hinata felt hurt, broken. The boy she loved wants to leave and doesn't see her friendship as sincere. She was grasping at the place her heart was in, stifled a sob. "Naruto-kun, please don't go. I care about you, give me a chance to prove it." Naruto just shook his head sadly. "I'm not staying Hinata. Now move, I don't want to hurt you." Hinata took her Jukin stance, held a determined fire in her eyes. "I am sorry Naruto-kun, but you forced me." With her piece said, she lunged at Naruto with the veins around her eyes bulging out, indicating her Byakugan is activated. She moved fast, trying to lock up his chakra network with precise hits to chakra points. Naruto sidesteps her lunge and creates 10 shadow clones to surround her. The clones move in to strike but are destroyed by a storm of shuriken and kunai. Naruto turns to see the newcomer. "Tenten," said girl, dashes to Hinata's side, not taking her eyes off him. Tenten leans toward Hinata. "What's going on? Why is he attacking?" Hinata explains what he told her, with Tenten becoming slightly saddened. "Naruto, come on, this isn't how we should solve this. Let's go sort this out with Tsunade and get you back to the hospital." Naruto was becoming frustrated with their stubbornness. "I said no, you all had your chance, I'm not backing down. I don't care if I have to fight the 3 Sannin to get out of this hellhole, you won't stop me." Tenten sighed sadly for him. If she were honest with herself, she could see his side of things. She forgot he was there half the time, and that thought alone made her feel he was justified for his actions. But her opinion didn't matter. He was attempting to become a nuke nin and thus betraying the village, and it was her duty to stop him. "Hinata, go get help, I'll try to hold him here." Hinata hesitantly nodded before running off towards the Hokage tower. Tenten took out a scroll and opened it, summoning a storm of random weapons from scythes and katanas to kunai and windmill shuriken rushing at Naruto. Naruto Kawarimi with a log and summoned a battalion of clones to charge her. She quickly dealt with them by summoning a bladed bow staff and threw it at the charging group, destroying them. "Naruto, I can't apologize for everyone, but I'm sorry. I just felt you didn't need my friendship." She shortly figured out that was the wrong thing to say when she felt an immense pressure pressing down on her. "I didn't need it." The pressure receded slowly before it exploded back out full force, bringing Tenten to a knee. This just proves it. No one cares. If you did care and truly meant what you said, you would know that a real friend is all ever wanted. You and the rest are just like every one of these fucking villagers. So blind by your arrogance you can't see what's right in front of you. Naruto now had red chakras swirling around him, acting as a beacon for every ninja in Konoha. Do you know why I'm like this? Ask Tsunade. I don't care anymore. I'm a Jinchuriki, a holder of a Biju. Hate me no, just like every other hypocrite this hellhole houses. Tenten for one was completely terrified. She wasn't one to dig into the lives of others, but this red malicious chakra that was rolling off him in waves made her wonder what he went through to act like this. She was cut from her musings by Naruto disappearing in a blur of speed, only to appear in front of her with his fists knocked back. Her eyes widened seeing him close the distance so fast, and couldn't react fast enough to dodge or block the uppercut that forced her jaws to make a painful sounding clack. Tenten now lies unconscious in a small impression in the middle of the road. Naruto didn't like hurting them even if they weren't really his friends, but they were trying to stop him. He couldn't allow it. Naruto knew they would be coming for him now. Even if he hadn't attacked a Konoha shinobi, he was officially a traitor of the village. Without pondering his situation anymore, he took off out the gate and headed to Wave Country. Tsunade wasn't having a very good day, and it all seemed to revolve around her idiotic little brother figure. First, she's called to a council meeting discussing the fate of the young blonde. Just remembering it gave her a major migraine. Flashback. Council chambers. It was early afternoon when she was summoned to the council chambers for an unnamed reason, and from the massive amounts of chakra it took to keep Naruto alive long enough for the Kyuubi to heal his chest wound, she just wanted some sleep. She was constantly feeding him medical chakra over the course of 3 days, which took their toll, forcing her to use her backup reserves. Upon kicking open the door, she saw the Shinobi Council, which was formed by the Yamanaka, Inuzuka, Akamichi, Hyuga, Nara, and Sarutobi clan heads. The civilian council being made of random merchants and civilian clans not worth mentioning. Tsunade glared at the civilians and then looked to the 3 elders at the end of the table. What is it now, you old farts? I have better things to do than sit here all day listening to you all bicker. The man wrapped in bandages hiding his right eye and arm stood leaning on his cane. We want the banishment of the Kyuubi Jinchuriki. Our scouting report has told us there were traces of the fox's chakra at the Valley of the End. It is clear that the Kyuubi brat intended to kill Sasuke instead of retrieve him like the mission implied. He retook his seat once his request ended. Tsunade rose from her seat to glare heatedly to the old warhawk. Denied. Naruto Uzumaki was well within his mission parameters. The mission had 2 optional objectives. 1. Bring Sasuke back alive. 2. Kill the Uchiha, destroy the eyes, and burn the body. Neither objective was met, that is true, but that is all they were, optional. The mummified man stood again. It does not excuse the possible release of the Kyuubi. He used its chakra to fight Sasuke Uchiha, and so I believe I speak for the welfare of the civilians when I urge you to reconsider. Tsunade groaned in annoyance. I've said this before. The seal designed to hold the Kyuubi was designed to slowly leak its chakra into Naruto's chakra reserves, thus expanding them at a smooth, slow, constant rate, continuously building up his reserves, slowly draining the fox's power. By the time it's finished, Naruto will have the reserves of the 9 tails with none of the malice. Of course a seal like this is delicate. A member of the civilian council stood. Exactly what do you mean delicate? I mean, due to the seal's function of siphoning off the fox's chakra, it allows an emotional connection to it. The fox can force its chakra through the seal during times of great emotional stress such as intense sadness and blistering rage. Tsunade paused to allow the information to digest. When in one of the 2 emotional states, the fox's malicious and potent chakra has a much greater effect on his mind. Now with that being said, you have lost all grounds on the charges of Naruto Uzumaki. So on the grounds of banishment for one Naruto Uzumaki, the request is denied. What other matters was I called for? The council remained silent until Tsunade stood. I hereby call this meeting adjourned. Good night. Flashback end. Tsunade groaned at the memory. Before reaching for a storage seal placed under her desk, a scroll poofed into her hand. She unraveled it and channeled chakra through the seal on the center. In another poof stood a bottle of sake. She uncorked it and took a swig, remembering her encounter with Sakura. Flashback. Konoha Hospital. She had just got out of the she was tired and needed sleep. Even with Sannin-level chakra reserves and stamina, it isn't easy staying awake for 3 days healing anyone, let alone someone with a fist-sized hole in their chest. She visited him to see if his wounds had opened but was pleased when it was mostly closed. Tsunade was just about to fall asleep when the door to the hospital room she was using burst open to reveal an angry Sakura. The girl bowed respectfully to her leader. "Lady Tsunade, I need a word." Tsunami groaned in frustration. "Fine, spit it out. I request you take me on as an apprentice." Tsunade's brow arched in surprise. "May I ask why you want to be trained by me when your Jonin-sensei Kakashi is more than capable? I feel that I would benefit most from training under you, considering you won't be 3 hours late to a lesson." Tsunade nodded in understanding. "Then may I ask why you want to get so much stronger so quickly?" Sakura started to tremble and shake, but whether it be from anger or determination she wasn't sure until she lifted her head enough to show her emerald eyes through her pink hair practically glowing with determination. "I want to bring Sasuke back, and I can't trust Naruto to do it. He hates Sasuke for something that wasn't his fault. Then when I asked where Sasuke-kun was, Naruto got angry at me. So I also want the strength to put him in his place for Sasuke-kun." Tsunade's brow was twitching violently and her eyes held barely restrained rage. "I'm sorry Sakura, but Sasuke made his choice and now Naruto is having to pay for it. I will play no part in you staying a fangirl, especially for those selfish reasons. Naruto has shown you more loyalty in a day than the Uchiha has his entire life, and from what I heard of him screaming at you, it sounds like you deserved it. Comrades always come first Sakura. When you learn to let Sasuke go, then come talk to me." Sakura at this point in time was biting her tongue to keep from screaming at her, so she shakily bowed with clenched teeth and excused herself. Tsunade was originally contemplating taking her on as an apprentice, but after hearing what she planned to do to Naruto, she just couldn't allow it. Her jutsu and strength were supposed to be used to save lives and defend comrades, with the occasional use to bring righteous feminine fury on any unsuspecting perverts. Jiraiya. Her skills as the last senju weren't meant to be used for such things. She could have counted off the ever-growing list of headaches but was halted by Hinata throwing open the door, panting heavily. "Hokage-sama, it's Naruto, he's trying to run off." Tsunade didn't need any more incentive as she screamed for her Anbu. "Neko, you lead a team to follow him and drag his ass back here. I don't care who's on the team as long as he's brought back." The Anbu knew not to waste any time when it came to Naruto. His pranks as a child could only closely be described as absolute hell. If he was given an inch, they would regret his traps. He was surely arming to slow down any pursuits. They didn't want a repeat of the Great Custard Bomb Voyage. It was a very dark, depressing, and oddly delicious day in Anbu HQ, but if they were honest, it was drop-dead funny how every window had custard leaking down the edges, while surprisingly the delicious filling absorbed the chakra from their elemental attacks, leaving Neko to cut her way out of the custard-filled base with a single katana and a lifetime worth of desert. So without wasting any more time, they disappeared in a swirl of leaves. Naruto was currently rushing through the trees to try to get to Wave before his deadline. Naruto would summon a few clones and have them henge into limbs and rocks in order to relay the locations of his pursuers. He knew Tsunade wouldn't let him leave without a fight, so when his first clone popped, he received the information he wanted and summoned 50 clones to slow them down and give him time to escape. He had learned that the shadow clones were perfect for infiltration missions from Jiraiya because of the ability of whatever the clone learns is sent back to the original when destroyed, and he's proud to say he loved that little benefit. Every time he found a wave of clones destroyed, he would send another 50 to replace the previous wave. Along the way he would have a few clones set up harmless traps and snares while he continued on. It was nearing nightfall and he needed a safe place to rest for a while. It wouldn't be good to have to avoid Anbu in the element they trained, it would only backfire. Naruto hadn't really thought of packing food for the trip, so he was left with his ever-present emergency food pill scroll. They were a given when hunting traitors and missing nin, as well as long-term missions that take you away from civilization. They were basically balls of nutrients with a 5% fat ingredient. They aren't tasty in any sense of the word, but they drive off hunger temporarily. He popped one in his mouth and sealed the rest. There were enough for a 2-week trip until they ran out. Naruto then took off his jacket, folded it and laid it down to be used as a pillow. It wasn't long after his head hit the pillow that he fell asleep while a clone watched over him. Naruto is currently avoiding the mass amounts of Anbu clones included while making it to the border of Fire Country. He would officially be marked a missing nin once he crosses, but it didn't matter. He couldn't stay there anymore. That place holds the worst memories of his childhood. The mere thought of them causes him to start shaking uncontrollably in anxiety. In all honesty, it's amazing he stayed at the village as long as he did. A team of 3 Anbu leapt past his hiding place, giving him a window to advance undetected. Years of running and hiding from them gave him an idea in how they think, thus allowing him to avoid them much easier. True, it was almost impossible to hide from their stupidly high sensing, but again, if you pulled half the over-the-top pranks he pulled, you would learn to avoid the Anbu in more ways, fitting a seasoned Anbu captain. After several more close calls, Naruto finally crosses the border, marking him a missing nin, giving his pursuers reason enough to kill him if given the word by the Hokage, who must personally identify Naruto as a rouge ninja for the group to collect his bounty. So without further distraction he continued sneaking when he froze, feeling someone tap his shoulder. Naruto turned to see a head of familiar purple hair. Neko? The last thing he expected was for Tsunade to send his past guardian to detain him. Neko glared at him from behind her cat mask, while she whispered angrily, "What the hell did you think you were doing? Not only attacking a leaf shinobi, but to add to the list you go and run off away from the village?" Naruto sighed in defeat. He knew he couldn't talk her down, but humored her. "I'm sorry Neko-chan, but I can't stay there anymore, it's just too painful. Every time I'm walking down the road to the Hokage Tower I see the orphanage and I relive everything that happened there. And I have to get stronger. I will come back, but I will be much stronger than I am now." Neko continued to stare at him when they heard a voice call out, "Neko, have you found anything?" "My clone found what appeared to be a camp in a nearby cave. I assume he used it to rest." Neko saw the pleading look in his eye and sighed in defeat before answering, "No, it would seem he passed by hours ago. We need to move before he gets away. I'll inform the others. Go north towards the cave as the rendezvous point. We'll head out in 30 minutes. The man takes off to fulfill his orders while Neko turns back to Naruto. "You owe me for this big time. I bought you enough time to reach the border, so don't let me or the others catch you again. I'm not covering for you a second time." Naruto surprised her with a hug and a quick thank you before dashing off. Hinata felt horrible. Not only did she fail to keep Naruto from leaving her, but she left Tenten to fight him alone while she got help. And because of that, Tenten now has a minor concussion, missing a tooth, and shortly-term memory loss from the impact. Hinata was now sitting next to Tenten's bed while she recovers. They were both currently talking about the talk of the village. "I can't believe he did this. What happened to the lovable goofball I used to call a friend?" Tenten's voice was laced with anger and curiosity. He felt like he was alone. He was hurting Tenten. Tenten scoffed at her friend's response. "Well, now I'm the one hurting. I don't understand what you see in him, Hinata." Hinata felt her anger swell when she heard this. "Have you ever bothered to hang out with him before? Have you seen the way he's treated every day? You should ask everyone's opinion on him. You will understand why he feels that way when you do." Tenten looked away from her and huffed. "If he was treated so bad, it must be for a good reason. I'm not impressed by what I've seen so far." Hinata couldn't take it anymore. She stood up and stomped to the door before turning and looking at Tenten. "I've watched him a long time. He doesn't deserve to be treated the way he is. His time in the orphanage was something I wish I could unsee. He was left to the point he could hardly breathe through the fractured ribs and crushed windpipe. And you're so engrossed in Neji you haven't bothered to look at anyone else. Think about that." She slammed the door behind her, leaving a shocked Tenten to her thoughts, and ran out of the hospital to pack. She wanted to follow him, even if she became a missing nin. So she snuck in her room and began to pack, her eyes focused on the task at hand. Moving from drawer to drawer, taking a couple sets of clothes for a possible solitary lifestyle. She jumped out her room's open window and left the compound without being spotted. She may be shy and nervous, but there were times when her normal demeanor was overridden by her drive. Hinata scaled the wall as fast and quiet as possible and left the village in pursuit of Naruto. Naruto had finally reached the ocean, but he still needed to reach the bridge named after him. The only problem was the Anbu patrolling the docks. The only way to wave was past his current challenge. Damn, I need a distraction, but without a team that's next to impossible. A clone wouldn't last long enough to be a decent distraction. An army would be too obvious, and against Anbu they would be wiped out, so I can't force my way through. Any ideas, Kyuubi? You said you wanted me to get stronger. If I fail to get by, that's not gonna happen. Naruto heard a scoff come from his tenant before his deep voice spoke out. Of course, simply channel my chakra into your clone. It will last much longer than your normal ones, and it will act as a flare to attract them like moths to an open fire. Thanks, Kyuubi. Don't get used to Igaki. If they catch you, you're as good as dead. And I want to live longer until I'm able to break free. Naruto was about to try when Kyuubi's voice spoke again. Are you stupid? Summoning clones this close to them would instantly draw them here, ruining our plan. Make some distance before trying again, retard. I'll help you focus my chakra now, get moving. Naruto mentally slapped himself for nearly screwing up his only chance of escape and shortly backtracked to a clearing a good distance from the shore. He held his fingers forming a cross and whispered his technique, Shadow Clone Jutsu. The clone appeared more animalistic than his creator, his hair more unkempt and split at the ends, his nails lengthened an inch but are now sharpened to that of a knife, and dark malicious red eyes replaced his deep well of blue. Okay, you know the plan. Lead them on as long as you can while I make my way to wave. The clone nodded before taking off, now running on all fours like an animal. He waited a few minutes hanged as a rock until he saw the large group of Anbu pass by overhead. He waited another minute to be sure they were far enough away before he took off towards the shore. He found it empty, all the Anbu were gone. His plan worked. Naruto walked to the shore and channeled chakra to his feet. He took his first step onto the ocean surface and immediately moved into high gear, kicking off to make it to the other side before his clone dispelled. Hinata was making good time. She was sure no one seen her leave, so stuck to the road Naruto had left on. She was sure she knew where he was going because when Shizune talked to him, Hinata was outside the window listening in. She heard all about his meeting the ocean god and was sure this was where he was heading. She had to stop him. She had been running at full speed the entire time. To most she would only be a midnight blur in the wind. Aside from keeping her Byakugan active since she left the village and pushing chakra into her legs to increase her speed while more chakra went to her lungs to help her breath, she was running low on chakra. She pulled out a small pouch and pulled out her clan's special chakra pills and swallowed it whole. The effects were instantaneous. She felt her chakra reserves replenish like a hole in her being had been filled. It wasn't long until she felt an evil, malicious presence pushing her down. She stopped dead in her tracks and looked towards the source to see what looked like Naruto covered in red chakra. Something was off about him though. She knew him better than anyone and she was able to tell that wasn't Naruto. The Naruto she was looking at was running from Anbu. The Naruto she knew wouldn't run from a fight. He would stand his ground and beat the odds like he always did. She recognized it was a clone, so pushed on past the Anbu without drawing their attention. She felt that if Naruto had gotten this far so quickly, he may leave before she has the chance to join him. She just had a little further to go. Naruto was relieved he finally saw the shoreline to wave. He was almost there. The means to his dream of becoming Hokage are finally within his grasp. He knew he needed to waste little time, but he had one stop to make before he left. The graves of two people Naruto had respected, the graves of Zabuza Momochi and Hikuyuki. Naruto bowed respectfully to the graves of two of the most influential people in his life. It was them who taught Naruto what true strength was and how to get it. Protecting those who are important to you, relying on friends as much as they rely on him. He always treasured their lesson. Haku was a good guy. He may have fought for Zabuza thinking himself a tool, but in the end even Zabuza Momochi, demon of the bloody mist, claimed Haku as his own son and wanted nothing more than to see him happy. He still remembered his talk with Haku in that clearing. Still to this day his words influence him. To protect those who you deemed precious, that is where people can truly become strong. It was sad, it truly was. Naruto allowed a single tear to fall for his friends before he gave a silent prayer. After his prayer, Naruto began his trek to the bridge he helped Tazuna build. And there, leaning on the railing, was the man he came to see, Oceanus, the self-proclaimed ocean god. The god continued to look out towards the ocean while Naruto stood unsure of what to say. The god's voice sounded deep but calming. It's good you decided to come, Naruto. I was beginning to think you weren't coming. It didn't help I was asleep for 3 days, old man. Oceanus chuckled in amusement. No, I suppose it wouldn't, after all you are only human. The god smirked at Naruto's deadpan expression. I still doubt you're the sea god, you still haven't given me proof by the way. The god chuckled, if I was sure I wouldn't drown everything with my power I would demonstrate, but sadly, this world cannot withstand the power of a god. The Shinigami pushed it when creating his Shikifuin, created major problems in entirely unrelated worlds which we ultimately were forced to sort out. Naruto nodded in understanding. I suppose that makes sense, but what were these problems? The creation of the Shikifuin tore a small hole in the barrier of life and death. Unfortunately, that hole forced the creation of a new element of sorts. Take your chakra for example, it is a part of said element, the purest form of the multiple scattered shards of the element. But in order to keep the living and dead from walking among the living, we were forced to create a key to the newly formed gate created by Shinigami. Fortunately, it can only be uncovered by someone of this world, minimizing the risks. This part struck Naruto's curiosity. Wait a moment. Why is it only people of our world? Because of that pure shard I told you about, I believe your people called it the Shinju. They were more accurate than they are aware of the naming of it. The key we forged was the fruit of the Shinju. We had hoped our warning of devouring it would be enough to keep the key from falling into the wrong hands. It did for a time before a greedy princess devoured it and gained the key your people call the Rinnegan. Naruto tilted his head in confusion. Rinnegan? The eye of the sage or God's eye as your people have come to know it. The tear in the fabric of life and death opened a gate that we were only able to seal with the creation of the Rinnegan becoming the key. We will discuss this later, but now we must not waste any more time, the opening could close at any time. Oceanus then held his right hand out over the water and Naruto watched in awe of the display before him. The water cleared revealing a bright golden glow. The opening in the water was about half the size of the bridge. Oceanus jumped over the railing and into the glow. Naruto was about to follow when he heard a familiar voice call out. Naruto. Naruto looked towards the end of the bridge to see a disheveled Hinata breathing heavily. Hinata? What are you doing here? You're supposed to be in Konoha. Hinata breathed deeply for a few minutes just trying to get more air in her lungs. I couldn't let you go. Her words came out between breaths. Naruto looked her over and sighed. Hinata, why would you come here? I'm leaving. Nothing you say or do will change that. Hinata fell to her knees panting from exhaustion. Hinata mumbled something so Naruto couldn't hear. Speak up, I couldn't hear you. Hinata took a deep breath and said just loud enough he could hear, then please, take me with you. Naruto was stunned for a moment, but before he could he felt Oceanus place his hand on his shoulder, causing Naruto to look at him over his shoulder. I'm sorry girl, but my dimension is only for my students and myself. Even if my sister were to take you under her wing you wouldn't be able to see him until after his training is complete. Hinata wanted to cry but she held off but asked with a small sob, how long? How long would it take? Oceanus looked her over before he sighed, longer than most, 7 years. I would have to force his mindset to accept its ability to use magic instead of subconsciously drawing on chakra. The same would be the same for you if you were accepted by my sister. Hinata let a small amount of hope enter her voice, can I meet her? Please, it would mean so much if I could stay with him. Naruto stood stunned as the conversation progressed, he couldn't fathom why she was doing this. It could be she's just doing this because she feels guilty as well as numerous other reasons. Hinata, why now? You had 12 years to be my friend, why now? Hinata shifted nervously under his gaze but before she could answer Oceanus spoke. We can discuss this later, girl, I will take you to my sister so she may judge you. But be warned, I am under no obligation to treat you a certain way, neither is my sister, so as long as you are a guest you must listen to my sister and myself. Hinata nodded her head quickly before the sound of footsteps echoed along the bridge before the Anbu jumped behind Hinata and restrained her causing her to thrash and struggle towards Naruto. Naruto seeing her struggle went to intercept but before he knew what happened Oceanus roughly grabbed his shoulder and threw him into the vortex below. The Anbu seeing this went to attack Oceanus. Seeing this Oceanus breathed in deeply and called his attack, Ocean Gods, Bellow. A large twister of golden salt water erupted from his open mouth and collided with the incoming Anbu washing them over the opposite end of the bridge. Oceanus looked around to find Hinata but failed to spot her, he sighed before turning and following after Naruto. Hinata continued to struggle against her bindings and captor before she felt her captor stop. She was dropped onto the ground to see Naoko looking down on her. Hinata wanted to scream at her for keeping her from her Naruto-kun, but Naoko cut her bindings before grabbing her shoulders. Hinata-sama, I know you're angry and you have every right to be, but I'm giving you the chance to get away from the village and grow on your own. Stay in the shadows and out of the public light. Keep in contact with me via messenger bird. I expect one message every week for an update and I will respond every time. After you read my response, burn it. Hinata was greatly confused and let her confusion be known. Why are you helping me? I thought Anbu were loyal to the Hokage. Naoko removed her mask and stared into Hinata's eyes. We are. But my loyalty belongs to both Hokage-sama and Naruto's mother. I made a promise to her that I would support Naruto and his decisions regardless of loyalty to my village. Now knock me out to make it believable and get out of here before my team follow us. Hinata was about to refuse, but the glare she received from Naoko caused her words to die on her tongue, so she settled with a nod of acceptance. She jabbed a chakra-enforced finger into Neko's neck, instantly rendering her unconscious. Without any time to waste, she headed back to the bridge, taking a longer route. Naruto couldn't think straight. His head felt fuzzy and his eyes felt strange. Like waking up from a dream only to find yourself in a nightmare where you're slower. He looked around only to see what looked like stars surrounding him. He tried to shake the feeling from his head only to lose it when he remembered Hinata. His eyes shoot open and his recent feelings vanish while he looks around desperately searching for her only to find more stars. It was oddly depressing, but he could admit the scene laid out before him was beautiful. Before he could grasp his current thoughts, Oceanus reappeared in a swirl of water. I'm sorry for leaving her behind, Naruto. There was nothing we could have done before this gate closed. Naruto looked angrily at him. What do you mean there wasn't anything we could do? I could have saved her and taken her with us, and you're a supposed god. Why couldn't you do anything? Oceanus sighed with irritation, because mortal affairs are out of my hands. Those nin were trying to interfere with our business. The business of gods are out of mortal comprehension, and it is a great insult when it happens, thus giving me the right to stop them in their tracks. Naruto took a breath to calm himself. Do you know what they're going to do to her now? She's now an official traitor for trying to follow me. They're going to execute her and I'm powerless to do anything. At this point, Naruto allowed a small tear to slide down his face. She followed knowing that she could be killed for it. She may not have been there early on, but she was there when I needed her. I just wish I could tell her I accept her apology. Oceanus chuckled, causing Naruto to glare at him. It's a good thing that friend of yours let her go then. What friend? I believe you called her Naoko. She released the girl and let her escape. Naruto seemed confused, but he wasn't gonna look a gift horse in the mouth, so he smiled happily. Now then, we are almost there. It is my honor to say you are the first mortal to step foot in my domain. Welcome to my paradise. The area lit up in golden light, overwhelming Naruto's eyesight. It was several moments before he could see again, and what he saw took his breath away. As far as the eye could see was an ocean in every direction, but in the distance was a massive structure easily visible. The columns surrounded the structure like a fence, but the truly magical aspect of it came from the rainbow of colors swirling over it prospectively. Spires of water twisted and turned around the structure into the flurry of colors, making the structure seem caged. But a statue of Oceanus stood over the cage with his hand held out over the ocean, palm facing down, as if daring all who threatened the structure. It was marvelous. The ocean, so calm, didn't seem eerie but surprisingly calming. But the sky was something to behold. It was night, but the way the still waters of the ocean reflected the night sky felt like something out of a dream. Every motion reflected off the calm surface. Wow, Naruto's voice nothing but a whisper. Yes, my home truly is beautiful. It may sound like gloating, but I am more proud than anything. I guess you didn't lie about being a god then, huh? What? I wanted proof you were a god, and you said you couldn't prove it but gave little reason to trust you. You put faith in me to follow my heart here, and now I'm staring at not just proof of you being a god, but the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. Oceanus chuckled in amusement. Yes, I suppose so. Now let me ask you something, Naruto. Think of it as your first lesson. What is the ocean? What is its purpose in this world? Naruto pondered the questions for a while. A massive body of water. And its purpose is to provide homes to fish to eat? Oceanus howled with laughter, causing Naruto's face to grow red with anger. What the hell are you laughing at? Oceanus calmed himself to a short chuckle. You're only half right. The ocean is a means of purification. It is the very life of the world's inhabitants. If the sea did not exist, then there would be no fresh water to drink and the world would die. Oceanus let his words sink in before continuing. Did you know the ocean has two main personalities? Naruto shook his head in rejection. The ocean is a neutral force of power that is affected by emotion. When a certain emotion takes hold, the ocean is either happy and is willing to help others cross her waters, or angry and will do everything it can to destroy everything floating along and kill the passengers. There are minor emotions that also have a different effect, but we will focus on these two most after you learn how to access and use magic. Naruto smiled brightly at him. Hi. Naruto is sitting lotus position on the beach of Oceanus Palace in deep concentration while Oceanus watches him. You're doing well. Now, magic is the physical embodiment of your mental power. But you must give it form before it can become whole. In order to do this, you must tap into its core by reaching out to the physical string that attaches itself to your core. Now reach out and grab it. Naruto takes a deep breath, enjoying the ocean air to calm his mind before slowly raising both hands out in front of him. He clenched and unclenches his fists in an effort to grasp his power like Oceanus told him to. This lasted for several minutes before Naruto released a frustrated sigh, leaning back and digging his hands into the sand to support himself. Dang it, I come so close all the time but I just can't reach it. Oceanus chuckles. Naruto, magic is very complicated even with people from its own world. It's not something that can be learned overnight even for you. You have been accustomed to using chakra, so naturally tapping into a foreign energy source is even harder to learn for you. I know, but it's just that I've been doing this for the past week and every time I come close to getting it, something happens and I lose that tingling feeling in my hands. Could it be you get overexcited and thus lose concentration? If that's the case, then all you need is to experience that sensation enough times to where you don't expect to succeed. Then while you expect to lose the sensation, you will embrace it. Naruto thought it over a bit before nodding. Then I'll just have to work harder. Oceanus stood to his full height before saying, now, while you do this on your own, send about 20 clones with me and I'll bring them to my library where I'll start them on learning wind manipulation. Naruto looked at him questioningly with a tilt of his head. Why? I thought we were focusing on unlocking my magic. You are, but you have 7 years before you must leave to the nation Fury. If we spend all your time on magic, it will make it that much more difficult to mix chakra with magic. At this, Naruto shoots up. Nani? You can do that? Oceanus merely nodded, but of course, the splintered element may have had multiple reactions to different people, but they were originally a whole, so it's like putting a puzzle together to see the whole picture. So since they were originally a whole, that means that everyone has the latent ability to use the whole element, but it is the power of gods, so it will put a massive strain on the mortal body. Naruto at this point was holding his head with swirls in his eyes. Sorry, but could you repeat that in English, please? The potential to use the element are in everyone, just blocked by mental barriers you are currently learning to overcome. Oh, okay, I get it. But what do you mean mental barrier? Oceanus just shook his head in disappointment. Your mindset. If you grow up knowing of one specific energy and neglect to acknowledge any other power present in your body, then your mind subconsciously creates a barrier that blocks access to it. Now, no more questions, summon your clones and get back to meditation. Naruto nodded and did as he was told, disappearing in a large cloud of smoke. When it clears, 20 clones of Naruto are sitting on the beach looking at Oceanus. Oceanus motions for the clones to follow him, leaving the original to continue trying to draw on his magical energy. 3 hours later, the library Naruto's clones are working in seems more like a tower made entirely from books and scrolls, with several medium-sized rotating globes floating, spinning in a complete circle. The clones were currently reading up on different elemental techniques and elemental manipulation exercises until another Naruto walked through the huge double doors, panting lightly. Hey everyone, is Oceanus around? The voice echoed while the clones all pointed towards a column of water that led up into the darkness. Naruto cupped his mouth and shouted, Oi, sensei. What are you doing up there? The column of water began to rotate in the opposite direction before Oceanus appeared standing on the water holding a thick brown leather book that looked worn down by time. Nothing that immediately concerns you, my boy. Now is there something you need? Naruto scratched the back of his head before responding, yeah, I've been thinking, if chakra and magic were part of the same element, then wouldn't it be easier for me to learn if I just mixed my magic and chakra? If a mental barrier is all that's blocking it, it should be simple to take down. It's not that simple, Naruto. The problem is you could put yourself in danger if you don't have decent control over both chakra and magic. How so? At this, Oceanus' face grows stern, demanding attention and respect. Think of chakra and magic as two separate rivers. One flows to the north, the other flows to the south, and along the way the two rivers meet and the two opposing forces clash and duel for dominance until they both swell and overflow the river bank. Oceanus pauses to let the info digest before continuing. Your chakra flows through your body much like a river, supplying your body with energy in a single continuous flow in one direction. If you try to connect your magical reserves with your chakra coils and have them interrupt the flow of your chakra, your coils will expand exponentially so until they finally pop. In the area the energies struggle for dominance, instantly killing you. At the explanation, Naruto gulped in slight fear of the consequences. So you're saying I only have one chance to mix them both, otherwise I'll die. Oceanus nodded. Now you see why we're not going to force the matter until you can use both chakra and magic separately. Naruto nodded frantically. I'm just glad I asked before doing it myself. Oceanus chuckled at the dark look Naruto adopted after the revelation. Don't worry, Naruto, by the time we're done you'll have minimal chance of something like that happening. There will always be risk with every decision, but every decision always starts with a choice. And I believe your choice to come here will help not only your world, but the one I'll be sending you to when your training is complete. Now go get some rest after you dispel your clones, and remember too. Oceanus was cut off by multiple clouds of smoke signaling the clones being destroyed. Now an unconscious Naruto lies on the floor with anime swirls in his eyes. Destroy them separately. Damn, the boy's brain is going to be fried by the end of training. Sigh, oh well, he has to learn. Oceanus let a small smile grace his lips as he looked down at Naruto. Still, I'm happy he came. Good night. My son. Mindscape. Naruto once again found himself in the sewers of his mindscape in front of the Kyuubi no Kitsune. Naruto frowned, slightly irritated by the fox. What now, Kyuubi? The large fox grumbled under its breath. Show some respect, Gaki. I believe I've earned that much. I helped you get here, didn't I? You would have been strapped to that bed in that hospital all night if I hadn't stepped in. So the least you can do is show a small glimmer of respect. Naruto hummed in thought before smiling. I suppose you're right. Thanks for helping me out, Kyuubi-san. The large fox scoffed. Drop the san suffix. Just Kyuubi or Kyuubi-sama is fine, Gaki. Naruto nodded. Alright, Kyuubi, so what is it you wanted to talk to me about? Kyuubi lay his head on his paws with a single eye looking to Naruto indifferently. It's about the reason you're having a hard time channeling magic. Naruto instantly widened his eyes in full attention directed at his tenant. It's the seal, since from what I've been able to gather on magic from here it's almost exactly like my chakra, only lacking emotion. So because of its similarities with my chakra, it's absorbed into the seal the second it is used, but if you take a part of the seal off it will drastically reduce the amount of magic it absorbs and changes to chakra, thus enabling the use of magic. Naruto was absorbing everything like a sponge up until. Okay, now can you repeat the thing about the seal? Kyuubi looked at Naruto like he was stupid before banging his head on the gate painfully, causing the sewer to shake and the gate to creak, muttering, stupid. Stupid, stupid, stupid ninja. After the amusing display that had Naruto struggling to maintain control of his laughter, Kyuubi sighed. The seal is absorbing so much magic that if something isn't done you won't be able to use it for several years. Naruto smiled brightly. Oh, why didn't you just say so? How'd I stop it? The large fox grew a sinister grin. You must tear a corner of the seal off to allow more magic to flow. Naruto's eyes narrowed while his glare settled on the fox. What? Why would I damage the one thing keeping you from killing me? The fox chuckled in amusement. Worry not, ninja. A corner will not do much more than establish a psychic connection between us. Of course it would make it easier for me to influence you by allowing more of my chakra to escape the seal, but as long as you don't lose your temper there's nothing to worry about. Naruto took a cautious step towards the seal, never once taking his eyes off his tenant. Naruto reached for the upper right corner of the seal and removed the absolute bare minimum with the tearing of paper. The effects were instant. A golden light filled the room while the fox had an ominous red glow surrounding its form. The two powers clashed violently against each other in the air above. The shin-high waters of the sewer churned and began to grow violent as knee-high waves crashed against Naruto and the walls of the sewer. This vicious battle raged for several minutes before both energies receded slowly. The golden energy taking the form of a massive golden ball in the center of the room and the red ominous energy returning to the Kyuubi. The large fox raised an eye towards the glowing ball of energy before looking back down at Naruto. That certainly was interesting. Normally my power has the ability to corrupt and corrode energy. But this energy is a neutral force of nature. It absorbed my malicious chakra but I can't control it. It seems to only respond to those it belongs to. The Kyuubi lowered its head to rest in its paws before closing its eyes with a loud sigh that blew Naruto onto his rear. Naruto for one was at awe at how this new energy fought against Kyuubis. He could literally count on one hand how many times this has happened. Naruto turned his attention to the glowing ball of energy once more before he felt a familiar pull on his conscience causing him to be ejected into the dark hallway of his mind. Naruto awoke to one of his new favorite smells, the salty smell of the ocean. Naruto slept in a hammock held up by two palm trees on the beach. If he was honest, it was his favorite way to wake up now. The smell calmed him and reminded him of his choices that led him here. Sure, he wasn't proud of a lot of things he had to do in his life, but what was important for him was he didn't let his betrayal bother him. In a way, Konoha betrayed him and he merely reacted by cutting the root of his problems. Naruto breathed in the wonderful saltwater smell and released it feeling refreshed. It wasn't long before he got up and went to find his sensei. The best thing about being in a pocket dimension is the normal laws of reality don't apply. He could spend the entire day running full speed and although he'd get tired he would never break a sweat, and his body was stuck ageless while his normal body stopped working normally. He no longer needed to eat, so all in all while in the pocket dimension he could train as long as he wanted and not have to stop for lunch breaks, but Oceanus had him learning to cook for when he returned to the elemental nations. An added bonus in his words, girls are more likely to go after a guy who can cook. The perverted giggle he allowed afterwards still sent shivers down his spine. Naruto walked through the massive stone doors of the temple and walked down the hallway towards the kitchen for his first lesson of the day. Cooking. The kitchen was well stocked and everything one can look for in a variety of different meals. It certainly helps that the kitchen leads straight to the garden for vegetables and fruits, each categorized by the type of fruit it was. The garden itself seemed to be larger than the island, but after asking Oceanus he was told the garden was actually another pocket dimension that coincides with his, so he uses it as a garden. The kitchen's freezer was actually a room with countless glass containers large and small lining the edges of the room and creating a full circle in the center. Every meat that could be found everywhere seemed to be there. Intricate seals lined the glass. Although he wasn't a sealing genius like Jiraiya, it was fairly obvious the seals were for preserving food. In the kitchen, Naruto stood in front of Oceanus, his arms folded over his chest. "You've got to be kidding. You said you would be teaching me more recipes. I like learning jutsu, I can't deny it, but my reserves are almost gone after tearing of a portion of the seal. It would weaken me above all else." Oceanus stared at Naruto for a moment before he let out a sigh of defeat. "Fine, you can have the day off to replenish your reserves, but now your physical conditioning will be an extra 4 hours long to fill the gap." Naruto's face twisted into one of horror before Oceanus continued, "And while you can't overdo it, you will have a clone learning new recipes for an hour before he moves to studying my ocean-based healing spells." Naruto at this point was visibly pale. His normal training schedule was hell anyway. Now taking out jutsu does ease the load. Oceanus is taking full advantage of his seemingly endless stamina. Naruto stood frozen in terror before Oceanus chuckled darkly. "That isn't all either. I'm now officially starting you on kenjutsu training, so you'll spend 3 extra hours studying sword katas, styles and techniques." Naruto froze at this point before he found himself staring up at the ceiling on his back. Oceanus chuckled at his antics. "Now come Naruto, it's time to start your physical conditioning." Naruto whimpered before standing shakily and following his sensei out the door. Time skip. 1 week later. Naruto was now panting heavily from his use of resistance seals his sensei had him wear. The seals had multiple levels, each feels 2 times worse than the last. First felt like walking through water, second would be sand, third stone, and so on until level 10 where it shouldn't be possible to move. But although the seals were annoying as hell, he couldn't question the results when he turned them off before bed. His sword technique was one of Oceanus' creations called the Kinden no Kyo no Mei, Forbidden Ocean's Dance, a single sword style mainly used with a katana. The aspects of the style are to weave around your opponent and slowly using superior speed and agility to find weaknesses in your opponent's defense. But the more aggressive use of Kinden no Kyo no Mei devastates the opponent's guard by parrying all manner of physical attacks, without the use of chakra mind you, and immediately strike back at your disoriented enemy. The spinning motion of the style was originated from the Uzumaki style, so in honoring the legacy of the base of the style, whirlpool motions were mixed into the style, allowing the best mobility to fight in medium crowds. The use of the sheath as a non-lethal weapon was used to help in keeping the spinning effect more balanced. The sheath of katanas used for this style of fighting are custom made for when unsheathed would release a sound wave that would mess with the opponent's senses. All in all, it was an ingenious style that was a royal pain in the ass for Naruto to learn. Damn it, what am I doing wrong? Naruto clutched his hair and pulled roughly to relieve his frustration. Oceanus saw Naruto struggling and placed a hand on his shoulder. Patience, Naruto, you are doing nothing wrong as of yet. You just need to learn to focus my Ocean God Slayer magic through your blade while you draw it from its sheath. So when you are able to form a magic circle, we will begin channeling it into objects. That's another thing I don't understand. It's water that will go through the sheath, so how will it create a sound that screws with my opponent's senses? Oceanus chuckled at Naruto's growing curiosity and vocabulary. Ever since he started using the library, Oceanus had been forcing Naruto to learn more about things he wasn't taught in the academy. Well, Naruto, magic is a type of energy that can be manipulated just like chakra. The type of magic like my Ocean God Slayer magic can be either raw energy, or can be made solid water for attacks. So you just need to learn to manipulate my magic to that level of mastery. Naruto frowned. This could take longer than he thought. Sighing in defeat, Naruto nodded. Fine, but I want a sword of my own. These are okay and all, but these just feel, I don't know, off. Oceanus smiled approvingly. I was wondering when you'd ask about that. I have something I believe will satisfy you. Naruto's eyes shone with curiosity while Oceanus motioned for him to follow. Oceanus led him back to the library with the leather book from the previous week sitting on the table. Its name was scratched off, but Oceanus didn't seem to care as he picked it up and turned to him. This book was created from the compressed power of two gods. Within holds untold knowledge, which is why it isn't in the mortal realms. Power is but a tool that is easily bought, but knowledge is priceless. Think about what sword would be best made for you, and the knowledge and approximate location will be revealed on its pages. Naruto had never heard Oceanus speak so seriously. He felt honored he was trusted enough to hold such an item of power. So Naruto honored Oceanus' instructions, allowing his request to seemingly flow from his hands in a silver glow into the book. The book flew open while its pages turned as if by hurricane winds until it stopped on a single page. In the center of the yellow pages was a black bladed with a long red strip ran down the blade katana with a whirlpool-shaped guard. The hilt was of two dragons coiling around each other, one black the other white. The dragon heads tilted towards the other while both held a single orb the color of blood. The name along the top of the page read, Crimson Death. The bio was something he hadn't seen coming. Crimson Death blade forged from the fiery pits of hell by the Shinigami. Legend says the blade was forged for a child foretold to be the savior of the ninja world. The test of the Shinigami is running the blade's edge along the palm of your hand. The blade will read your intentions, your heart, your very soul, and judge whether to kill the holder or make them its master. Abilities A.N. Current Wilder non-existent. Location Uzumaki Ruins. Naruto closed the book with a pale complexion with a thought, this book is trying to kill me. Oceanus saw the look of horror on his face and pat his back to comfort the blonde. Just know that I have complete faith in your abilities. You can choose when to retrieve your weapon, but I recommend you hold off on such an endeavor until you have a basic understanding of my spells and magic. Naruto's shaking steadily stopped with Oceanus' words, and when the rational side of his brain rebooted, something he read in the book clicked. Wait, Uzumaki? Time skip. 3 months later. Naruto sits lotus position on the sands of the beach listening to Oceanus' lesson on his strongest attack. The ocean god's bellow is, in a word, destructive. Most artificial god slayers are implanted with the knowledge of our techniques, but what hinders them from pushing forward is learning the attack from scratch. As I've said before, the reason an artificial god slayer's attack is black is because they weren't trained by an actual god. Now let me see if you've improved. And remember, to narrow the flow of the bellow you must guide the flow of magic. Naruto nodded and stood tall. Naruto scrunched his eyebrows in concentration while a light golden glow emanated from his being like an aura. Naruto inhaled deeply, arching his back and holding his fists in front of his mouth to channel his magic called his attack, Ocean God's Bellow. The beam of salt water erupted from his throat with the pressure of a waterfall, spinning straight out towards the ocean, clearing a straight path through the water until the trench formed on the ocean surface collapsed. Naruto fell to the sand panting heavily. This had been his 5th time using that spell today alone. The other spells were rather easy to learn because most just covered his body and it was similar to channeling chakra, but anything that shot projectiles was much harder to learn. Oceanus pat Naruto on the back. Well done, Naruto, it isn't perfect, but that is where experience comes into play. Now go get some rest, we will pick up training tomorrow. Oceanus was turning to leave when he felt Naruto grab his arm. He turned to see a contemplating look on Naruto's face. I was wondering if I could go to the Uzumaki ruins. Oceanus' surprise was evident when his eyes widened slightly before a calm smile found its way to his lips. Of course, but I suggest you rest tonight to regain your strength. The Uzumaki were a powerful people before they were scattered, and they may have left a few surprises for unwelcome visitors. Naruto just nodded before leaving to sleep for the night in his hammock. Naruto lay in his hammock staring up into the stars, thinking about his journey tomorrow. What would he find? What would he see? Would he meet anyone? Oceanus said it was a possibility. He still remembered when he was told of his clan the day he learned of Crimson Death. He flinched when he remembered how he took it. Flashback. 3 months ago. Wait, Uzumaki? Naruto looks away from the book and to Oceanus, who smiled sadly at the blonde. The Uzumaki are a clan? The sigh Oceanus gave was answer enough. No, Naruto, they were a clan. Naruto felt a pig grow in his stomach. What? The Uzumaki were attacked decades ago. Nearly wiped off the map. A few survived. Now all that remains of one of the greatest clans that ever existed in your world has been scattered to the 4 corners of the elemental nations. You're the only surviving member of the main branch family. Naruto's brain was currently on overload. He had a clan. He had a family. It proves he wasn't alone. He felt relief knowing there may be others. But one thought kept nagging at him. Why were they attacked? As if reading his mind, Oceanus spoke sadly. They were masters of the sealing arts. They could create seals for many purposes, but their defense seals proved to be unmatched and thought to be impassable by anyone other than another Uzumaki. That strength with seals made them powerful and feared, and 3 of the great nations felt they would use their power to conquer them. So they neutralized the threat. At this point Naruto felt utter sadness swell within his being. It hurt, his heart cringed. It felt like someone drove a rusted knife through his chest while his eyes glossed over with tears. He fell to his knees and wept. He cried for the family he never knew. He felt cheated. Why was it always him? What did he do to deserve this hell? And then the rage began to burn. That spark had ignited into a small flame which grew stronger with each passing moment. His hair still shadowing his eyes, Naruto questioned Oceanus. Who took my family? After a moment of consideration on Oceanus' part, he knelt to Naruto's level. Do not follow the path of hate, Naruto. You may be justified in some cases, but that hatred will consume you and force you to lash out at those closest to you. Naruto looked up to his teacher, revealing his eyes to be menacing red with his slit pupils. I want to know. I deserve to know that much, don't I? Oceanus studies him for a brief moment before he takes a step forward. Kumo, Mizu, and Iwagakure are responsible for them. They feared the Uzumaki would conquer them, so they formed an alliance based on the desire to see to it the Uzumaki fell. Naruto glared down at the ground while adrenaline pumped through his veins, his rage coming to the point his brain throbbed from the pressure until the red malicious chakra began to swirl around his being. It began coating his skin, slowly forming long fox ears, and a single tail made from the chakra settled. Naruto let out a monstrous roar and began attacking everything wildly without restraint. His tail lashed out towards Oceanus, who simply moved to the side. Oceanus grabbed the tail and flipped Naruto over his shoulder and slammed him into the ground, creating a 5-foot crater with Naruto in the center. Mindscape. Naruto sat fetal position, arms wrapped around his legs and his face buried in his knees, sobbing. Why is it always me? What have I done to deserve this? Why can't everyone just leave me alone? His sorrow hurt, that feeling gripping his heart, this icy chill that wrapped around his form. He knew it all too well, he grew up with it after all. The feeling of being alone, absolute solitude. Naruto was so engrossed in his suffering he didn't even notice the fox behind him pushing chakra through the seal. It isn't common knowledge Kyuubi was a monster on the battlefield, but never let it be said he was heartless. He may not show it, but he cared for his container. It wasn't something he liked to do, but this was the only way to force him to grow stronger. He wanted Naruto to be able to defend himself, and his emotions will get him killed if not controlled. So he forces his chakra to make his negative emotions stronger. If he learns to control them when they're heightened, he would be much better off. The Kyuubi growled, irritated at his container's show of weakness. Kit, enough of the waterworks. You look pathetic. Naruto looked over his shoulder, showing his red puffy eyes and the tear streaks down his cheek. I don't care, Kyuubi. I just don't care anymore. The Kyuubi didn't like that answer. If him slamming himself against his cage was any indication, causing the room to shake and the bars to groan in protest. Enough, Kit. Yes, it's tragic about what happened to your clan, but it happened several years ago. It happened, and crying about it won't change that. If you want to sit and cry, tear this seal off and free me from suffering the pain of having to sit and listen to you blubber. Naruto looked at him in shock. It was a rare occurrence when the fox spoke in so many words, but it's unheard of when the fox actually gives a motivational speech, so his shock is understandable. The mere thought would make the usually stoic Itachi Uchiha burst out laughing from how ridiculous it sounds. Naruto sniffed and wiped his eyes with a grateful smile towards his tenant. I love you, to you overgrown talking carpet. Kyuubi growled in annoyance towards the name and thrust him back out of his mindscape before Naruto could see the smile of acceptance on the fox's snout. You're welcome, hairless monkey. Naruto lay in a small crater with the red chakra seeping back into the seal before the cloak fully dispersed. Oceanus standing above him. I want to know about my mother. Flashback end. Naruto sighed at the memory. It was difficult hearing how he attacked his mentor the way he did. It hurt how he learned his clan was destroyed. But after a while and a few talks with Oceanus, he finally felt normal again. If you can call a boy with a 12-ton mountain-sized fox with 9 tails and a spring-loaded temper normal, then yeah, he was peachy. But enough of the depressing thoughts. He was headed out early tomorrow morning to search for the Crimson Death. So without a long drawn-out sigh, Naruto closed his eyes and let sleep claim him. It's finally come, the day so many family secrets would be found. He would finally see his ancestral home. Naruto walked to the end of a long concrete dock Oceanus had built for travel. The time was here. The wait for the dimensional portal was over, so here he stood, next to Oceanus, who looked at him full of confidence. The time has come, Naruto. You shall appear back in Nami no Kuni at the exact spot you left. Travel to the harbor and ask for a boat to Uzugaku and state your name. Most don't go because of the Uzumaki Island defense, but your name may inspire someone to aid you. Naruto nodded in understanding. He stood tall and confident, but inside he was terrified. There was a chance he would die. Not only that, but it was his home, left in ruins no less. Could he handle it? Would he be overcome with emotion when he saw his home like he did when he heard about how they were defeated? He didn't know. But it felt like something was drawing him into the decision, a weird pull in his stomach whenever he considered leaving it be. Like something was coaxing him to accept. So that only left one choice. If it's surrounded by whirlpools, how can I get close? The Uzumaki used their own blood as the key to their great defense. Draw blood and allow it to be swallowed by the ocean. Naruto released a shaky breath before nervously laughing. Hee, shouldn't be too hard. Well, I guess it's time. Just as Naruto was stepping forward, Oceanus grabbed his shoulder. Be careful, Naruto, and remember, 5 days you must return. Otherwise you must wait another month to come back. Naruto waved of the statement and disappeared down the portal, leaving a smiling Oceanus. Nami no Kuni. Great Naruto Bridge. The portal spit Naruto out onto the bridge in an unglorified heap. Mumbling to himself indignantly, he stood. Damn it, I swear he did that on purpose. Naruto began walking towards the harbor like Oceanus instructed him to. Naruto stayed in the shadows of building while occasionally jumping from rooftops when there's no other way to proceed when an easier idea practically smacked him in the face. A henge. God, I'm so fucking stupid. This would have been so much easier if I thought of this earlier. So while in the shadows of a building, Naruto focused his chakra, and in a poof of smoke a tall brown-haired man with black eyes replaced Naruto dressed in civilian clothing. Sigh, much better, now it shouldn't be too hard to go unnoticed. With that happy thought in mind, Naruto made his way through the small crowd, occasionally looking at the stalls that sold foods and luxuries. All in all, Nami no Kuni looked to be in better shape than when he had been here on his first C-rank mission turned A rank. The memories of Zabuza and Haku still weighed heavily on his heart, but he couldn't do anything now, and he only had a small window to get back to Oceanus, so he couldn't even visit the graves. After about an hour of walking, he finally managed to find the harbor, which in retrospect shouldn't have been that hard to find considering Nami is called the Land of Waves, so it's only natural it's close to the open sea. The only person docked on the harbor was a seemingly feeble man in his late 60s with a white shirt and brown trousers. Naruto walked to the man in greeting before requesting his service to travel to Uzugaku. The man put up a small fight about the idea due to the whirlpools surrounding the island, but agreed hearing his last name was Uzumaki. The trip took about an hour, but the view was worth it. The violent and chaotic swirls of the whirlpools surrounding the landmass that should be considered a small country respectively was quite a sight, especially with the 30-meter-high wall of solid stone surrounding the landmass like a natural defense. Naruto stood from the boat and bit his thumb to draw blood and held it over the water. The drops of blood reacted strangely to the water. Although it was only a few drops, the blood spread quickly until a row of whirlpools turned crimson before they dissipated, leaving behind a calmer ocean. The man Naruto had helped from stared at him in shock. If he hadn't believed Naruto of his heritage, it was obvious now. Before he could speak, Naruto looked over his shoulder. Thanks for the ride, I'll be waiting on the beach in 4 days early morning. I'd appreciate it if you were here to pick me up around then. Naruto jumped from the boat onto the ocean and dashed for shore. The kind man waved back with a kind smile, assuring the blonde he would be here. With the man gone, Naruto released the henge and found a large gate between an opening in the wall. Upon closer inspection, Naruto noticed the large wooden gates were covered in carved seals, somehow too small to see from a distance. No matter how hard he tried, the gate wouldn't open. The scene was actually quite comical. But eventually he got frustrated enough to grow a tick mark over his eye and jump back from the gate. Naruto channeled his Ocean God Slayer magic to his shaking fist and ran full sprint towards the gate with his fists pulled back and with a might battle cry of Ocean God's breakdown fist. All became silent until Naruto released a pained scream holding his now red hand. Son of a bye. Naruto's pained cry was cut off by the bellowing laughter of his tenant. Bahahaha, oh you stupid monkey, ahaha. Hee hee, the gates reinforced with, can you believe it? Reinforcement seals. Haha, you really should have figured it out when Oceanus said the Uzumaki were famous for their speciality in the sealing arts. Same concept of shutting of the whirlpools, it's a blood seal, smear blood on the center seal, you pathetic excuse of an Uzumaki. Naruto grit his teeth in frustration of the jab to his heritage. It wasn't his fault his knowledge of his clan and clan speciality is so limited. If the Hokage had bothered to explain a few things to him, he would probably have taken training seriously. Oh shut it, you glorified rabbit. It's not like I had much time to study my family history, and alongside the fact I've been so booked on improving my Kenjutsu, chakra control, and Ocean God Slayer magic, I think I deserve a little slack. I haven't even had time to study Fuinjutsu. The glorified rabbit snarled at the name. Pitiful excuses, Ninjin. Your father wasn't of Uzumaki blood, yet he managed to become one of the greatest Fuinjutsu masters since the age of that blasted whore Uzumaki Mito. And he did it with blood and sweat. If circumstances permitted, he would have had my respect for several of his feats. Naruto blanked out hearing how Kyuubi supposedly knew his father and was desperate for answers. You knew my father? Tell me, who is he? Naruto couldn't see it, but he could actually feel the malicious smile that broke out on Kyuubi's face. Oh, I knew your father as well as your mother did. I would tell you, but sadly I enjoy watching you squirm far too much to tell you anything. Now Naruto was fuming. Listen here, you damn carpet, it's my right to know who my parents are and you're gonna tell me. The fox slowly rose to its feet, growling menacingly with a single crimson eye focused solely on him. Right? Rights? Who are you to order me to tell you something? Human hypocrite, you speak of rights while you deny me mine. If I was one to complain, I would scream for the freedom that was my birthright forcibly ripped from my hands by you humans. So don't you dare talk to me about rights, you hairless monkey. The Kyuubi's anger became more obvious as his rant went on, but it did hit a nerve on Naruto. He hadn't even thought of that as idiotic as it sounds, but in reality, if you're constantly avoiding death, it's much harder to consider the perspective of others. I suppose you have a point. I'm sorry, Kyuubi. Kyuubi for this part was actually stunned. Never in his time of being sealed was he ever apologized to for anything. But he broke the uncomfortable silence with a scoff. Damn right, I have a point. Now shut up and get started searching. Naruto sighed before biting his thumb enough to draw blood and smeared it on the center seal on the woodlock. The gates made an audible click before they slowly swung open. The village beyond was truly something else. The road he stood on was unlike any of the roads he walked on while in Konoha. If he had to guess the stone the brick road was made from, he'd say marble from the pure white. The road was curved at a rather large angle further down the road, and on both sides were destroyed stands which would promote a market. Good for instant access when entering the village, but bad for walking to the other side of the island for groceries. And the Hokage Tower standing tall and proud in the middle was stunning. It was basically a much taller version of Konoha's, but what caught his attention was the 4 pillars on the 4 corners of the tower. Giant dragons rose like they were taking off, each with an uzumaki spiral on the chest, one black, orange, yellow, and red. He decided the tower would be the best stop, but decided to rummage through the stalls and buildings beforehand to see if anything is left. It took longer than he hoped, but with the ever-useful shadow clone technique it only took 2 hours to clear the market district, and it was worth it. Most of the weapons and armor-type goods were taken in the invasion, but he found minor books on Uzumaki-style Fuinjutsu, which is leagues above normal Fuinjutsu. Nothing else was recovered, but if the Uzumaki were as powerful as rumored to believe, then he'd wager there is something in the tower. Naruto stood at a large bridge overlooking a large whirlpool, oddly enough, with the Hokage Tower supported by a large tower of stone that crawls along the bottom of the tower. Naruto shakily walked across, all the while looking straight ahead while his heart pounded in his chest. Don't look down, holy shit. A board snaps under Naruto's weight, causing him to nearly fall into the spiraling pool of death below. Naruto grabs the board and hauls himself up. This sucks. Shut up, kid, it's annoying when you complain. Keep sharp though, I feel a dark malicious chakra somewhere on the island. Something close by is screwing with my sensory abilities. Okay, thanks Furball, I'll keep an eye out. Kyuubi grunted in response and went silent, leaving Naruto to search outside the tower. After an hour of searching, Naruto decides to call it a day with the sun setting. It sucked there wasn't any fresh water he could take a proper bath, but it happens. Naruto makes himself comfortable in a building just across the road from the tower. It was by luck the bed was moderately comfortable, but the family picture on the nightstand brought a tear to his eye. A reminder of what should have been. A family of 4, all redheads, 2 men that look like brothers, a woman who could have been a wife, and a little girl, probably a daughter, all with large smiles on their faces. A visible tear fell on the little girl, startling Naruto, who vigorously wiped it away. Naruto sighed and placed the picture back on the nightstand with a sniff and proceeded to sleep. The next morning wasn't all that hard. Naruto ate a good meal of fruit from Oceanus Dimension and headed to search the interior of the tower with the help of clones. It took a majority of the day, but the results of the search came up positive. There was a hidden seal on the roof of the tower that generated a genjutsu that hid a long ventilation duct that leads straight down and through the stone column holding the tower. But for some time now it's felt like he's been watched. Like a predator hunting its prey, he's been on edge. It could just be nerves, because Uzushiogakure was said to have been abandoned. Of course things had been missed, such as the seal-created genjutsu. But no one could survive here for more than a few weeks. Right? Konoha 4 months after Naruto's escape. Has there been any sightings, Jiraiya? A tired and half-drunk Tsunade asked. Jiraiya sighed. Unfortunately not. Wherever the Gaki went can't be in the elemental nations. Usually rumor spreads at least of people who go missing or run away, Even the Akatsuki have rumors spread about them but absolutely nothing on Naruto. Jiraiya sat in the window next to Tsunade's desk pondering over possible places his missing apprentice could be when a thought struck. Hey, what about Uzu? It's the only place that my spy network can't reach, and the last place we can look without causing a war. Tsunade thought for a moment before nodding. How soon can you reach Uzu? 3 days at top speed, 2 if I summon. Good, summon and get your ass back here with anything you can find. If you find Naruto, drag him back, but I want force to be a last resort, talk him back if you can. But please, Jiraiya, bring my little brother home. Tsunade let a tear streak down her cheek to show how much she truly cared for Naruto. Jiraiya rubbed her back soothingly. Don't worry, Haim, I'll bring him back, believe it. Tsunade chuckled at his joke before summoning Shizune. Is there something wrong, Tsunade-sama? The woman said, appearing in a shunshin. Tsunade rubbed her temples trying to relieve the migraine. Yes. I am assigning you to hospital duty while Sakura takes over for you for the time being. She won't stop bugging me about training, so I plan on making the fangirl walk through hell for her training. Shizune bowed, hiding the dark smile on her face. Hi Tsunade-sama. Uzushioga-cure, unknown location. Hey Kyuubi, did you know about this place? Naruto finally reached the bottom and the sheer pressure of being down so deep made it hard to think with his ears popping. Kyuubi groaned in irritation. No kid, I've never seen anything like this before. Your clan had my respect before, but they just raised themselves a peg in my book. Good to know, but I don't understand how Iwa, Kumo, and Mizu missed something like this. It's too unrealistic to think with the size of this place. Naruto felt the fox nod in agreement. True, Iwa prides itself on its earth-release jutsu and manipulation. To think they didn't find this massive cavern is truly something to think about. And if this place stayed hidden, then there may be more Uzumaki alive than previously thought. Naruto felt himself hope that what Kyuubi said was true but didn't let it overwhelm him. His talk with his tenant was cut short when the sound of a blade being drawn echoed through the dark cavern. Who are you? How did you find us here? A deep angered male spoke. Naruto turned around multiple times trying to find the source of the voice. My name is Naruto Uzumaki. I just happened to stumble upon the seal-generated genjutsu. Uzumaki? The voice took on a surprised tone before going monotone. If you are Uzumaki, who were your parents? All Uzumaki are born with red hair, so you can see my skepticism is well-founded. Naruto took a deep breath. Uzumaki Kushina was my mother, I don't know my father. The voice was quiet before footsteps were heard behind him and lights came on from above. Naruto turned to see a tall, slim man with pure white eyes and a crossed pupil, his hair a deep crimson. A large sword strapped to his back, black trench coat with red trimming, gray long-sleeved shirt with a silver Uzumaki swirl lit in black flames, and black anbu pants with black boots. The newcomer slowly approached Naruto, who was eyeing him carefully until he stood but a few feet from each other. The man broke out into a grin. It's nice to see another surviving member. You wouldn't believe how boring it is sitting here for so long. I've been watching you since you stepped into the tower. Naruto was on full alert next to this man. He couldn't explain it, but there was something off about him. Naruto took a deep breath, calming himself. You know my name, but I don't know yours. The man looked shocked for a moment before he bowed respectfully, shocking Naruto. Forgive me, Naruto-sama. My name is Mikaza Uzumaki. Naruto started shaking his hands, trying to dismiss the formal atmosphere. Whoa, what's with this Naruto-sama crap? Just Naruto is fine, thank you. Mikaza blinked and bowed again. My apologies, you must be unaware of your mother's political standing. Kushina Uzumaki, your mother, was the daughter of the previous Azukage. Our leader is chosen from the direct bloodline of the clan or the purest. I would have taken over as clan head, but my mother was only half Uzumaki and my father held no Uzumaki heritage for me to inherit, making me 1/3 Uzumaki. And Kushina was as pure Uzumaki as humanly possible. So by the laws of old Uzushiogakure, you are the next Azukage. Mikaza finished his rant with a bow, leaving a stunned Naruto and a hysterical Kyuubi. Oh Kami, if you're the next Azukage, the Uzumaki clan are as good as dead. Ha 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 ha. Hey. I resent that carpet face. Naruto was cut from his inner rant when Mikaza waved his hand in front of Naruto's face. Naruto-sama, are you okay? You spaced out for a second. Naruto blinked once, twice and shook his head and rubbed the back of his head sheepishly with a grin. Sorry about that. What were you saying, Mikaza-san? Mikaza chuckled lightly. I was curious as to why you came here. Naruto made an O with his mouth and immediately got serious. I am looking to wield Crimson Death. At this Mikaza looked at him strangely. You sure about that? You must know the legend of the blade to know it exists. Naruto nodded with a smile. Don't worry about it. My luck hasn't driven me wrong before. You wouldn't happen to know where it is, would you? Mikaza shifted uncomfortably for a moment, rubbing the back of his head before he stiffened. I do know where it is, but I'd like you to stay a bit. Being alone down here for so long drives normal men mad after no interaction to the outside world. Mikaza then bowed in apology to Naruto. Naruto felt sympathetic towards his supposed distant cousin. He was beyond happy to hear him say his name, but his time with Oceanus drove off some of the moron that wasn't a mask. It made him cautious, and the chances finding another living member of the Uzumaki clan in Uzushigakure were slim at best. Naruto sighed and said, I'd love to, but I'm on a time-sensitive mission. If I'm not back in 3 days, it will take a long time to get back home. Mikaza sighed, rubbing the back of his head. Well, I'm sorry to say the room that holds Crimson Death is locked up tight with a calendar seal and reinforced with the strongest defense and burglar seals. It isn't opening until tomorrow, coincidentally enough. I'll show you if you want, but it's locked up tighter than the gate to the village. By the way, that water-coated punch was hilarious when it backfired, he. Naruto fumed at the comment while Kyuubi and Mikaza snickered at the memory. Naruto huffed and crossed his arms. Fine. But this would be cutting my time close. Hey, have you seen any other Uzumaki? Mikaza stiffened and turned towards the opening. Now that you mention it, someone else just stepped onto the island. 2 people actually. One chakra is absolutely vile and tainted while the other is confused, sad, and betrayed. Naruto narrowed his eyes when he heard the first description. Only 2 people he knew had chakra that was a bastardized version of Biju chakra. Orochimaru. Naruto whispered, tone dripping with venom. Mikaza noticed and smirked. Friend of yours, Naruto-sama? Naruto scoffed at the question and turned away from him. The snake Teme corrupted a friend of mine, killed my Gigi, and has hurt Kami knows how many people. Can you take me to them? Mikaza closed his eyes and furrowed his brows in concentration before shaking his head. Sorry, no can do. I don't know what it is, but I can only sense people who land on the island, and when they enter the ruins the signatures vanish. If I had to guess, it probably has something to do with the first trial of Crimson Death. Naruto tilted his head. Trial? Mikaza smirked. What? You didn't think it would be easy to get your hands on a legendary weapon said to be handmade by Shinigami-sama himself, did you? Naruto nervously laughed while Mikaza's sweat dropped. Seriously? Oh well, I'll explain. There are 3 trials one must pass before you can obtain Crimson Death. Trial 1. Find the vault containing it. 2. And this is the no turning back mark. You allow blood to flow across the seal locking the vault, and you are forced to relive every moment that makes you worthy of wielding it and binding your life force to the sword until it either accepts you as its master or kills you for being unworthy. 3. You must be the chosen one. Prove this by offering a blood sacrifice to the blade. At this point you will either live or die. Naruto paid close attention to the description but shook his head afterwards. Wait. This is about Orochi Teme, not the trials. Although the information will be useful. Naruto added the last part under his breath. Mikaza turned serious. I have detection seals all over the island, so I'll tell you if anything comes to close. Naruto nodded his head in thanks. Is it alright if I sleep here tonight? If I've learned anything about Orochimaru, it's that if you're caught unprepared you get a hickey. Mikaza nearly choked on air for the comment and looked at him strangely. A hickey? You mean he rapes people? Naruto chuckled and nodded. Pido Teme bit my friend's neck and he went nuts. Well, I want to see the vault before sleeping, so do you mind? Mikaza blinked at the info before nodding and motioned for Naruto to follow him down a darkened tunnel with the occasional torch for light. Undisclosed location. 2 hooded figures stood in an empty room. Both wore long brown cloaks that hid most of their features, but the shorter of the 2 had a visible strand of blood-red hair falling from a gap in the hood. Sasuke-kun, why are we here? The shorter questioned, raising her head enough to reveal a set of twin crimson pupils. Sasuke looked at the girl annoyed and sighed. We're here to find my new sword. Orochimaru told me it was here. You're only here to help me find it using your sensory ability. The shortest nodded with a smile. Anything for you, Sasuke-kun. The high-pitched voice suggested it was a woman. The figure wasn't denying anything either. Sasuke turned and walked away until he looked over his shoulder. Karin, search the beach. If you find anything, flare your chakra. The now identified Karin nodded and dashed off towards her objective, all the while thinking of the object of her obsession. Unknowingly heading towards a familiar blonde's chakra signature. Naruto sat on the beach outside a cave he found entrance to in the labyrinth of his friend Mikasa. He stared at the ocean reflecting morning light off its waters, thinking of starting his mental training. Oceanus had created a spell to help him come to terms with the evils of the world by reflecting his worst encounters from his childhood onto the waves and having the waves around the image mimic the voices he experienced. It was an emotionally painful training, but Oceanus had said that he would be more resistant to them if he can come to terms with them, thus making mental torture like Itachi's Tsukunomi useless. So taking a deep breath, Naruto held his hands above the water and spoke loudly, "Ocean gods, path to recovery." The water of the ocean swirled in front of Naruto and expanded until the diameter was 12 meters across in every direction, and within the diameter smoothed until it was completely flat, while along the edges the water arched and formed tubes of water, some small and some large. A picture started to form in the smooth water and revealed a scared and frightened Naruto, at least 7 years younger, curled into a ball in the corner of a wooden room with shadows dancing across his form and the walls. So what do we do first? We have 2 hours to enjoy this. I want to take our time and enjoy our money's worth. Naruto didn't notice the figure watching and listening from the distance, so he watched on as the memory played before him. What toys do we have to start out? I'd favor slowly digging his eyes out with a scalpel. The shadows slowly turned to a cowering and horror-stricken Naruto in the corner before maniacal snickering came to be heard. The scene that followed was simply gruesome. Naruto being held down by a large bulky man with no notable features. Naruto subconsciously placed his hand over his right eye and let a small tremor rake his body, while another featureless man slowly pushed the scalpel into Naruto's eye, ignoring the terror and pain-filled screams that ripped from the younger Naruto's throat. While the figure, still unnoticed by Naruto, covered her mouth with her hands in a silent gasp while the scene continued to play out. He, that was fun, Ni-san. Think the demon brat has suffered enough? The one holding Naruto down burst out laughing while he watched Naruto try to stop the bleeding from his now empty eye sockets. No, dear brother, our parents still need to be avenged. Hand me the bottle, been saving it for a special occasion such as this. The other man quickly handed the man the bottle with a grin. Now demon, this is a product I've been working on since you were discovered. It is purely meant to lead to your end in the most slow and painful way possible. Naruto tried to back away in fear, but he couldn't tell where the man was because of losing his eyes, and backed into the other man, who held him down again. The other man chuckled darkly, taking out the cork, and walked up to the struggling Naruto. He grabbed Naruto's jaw and forced open Naruto's mouth and poured in the poisonous yellow liquid and held his mouth and nose closed, forcing Naruto to drink the liquid so he could breathe. The two watched for the rest of their time as Naruto screamed until he lost his voice, squirming and writhing on the floor in raw agony. Naruto tried clawing at his stomach to stop the pain, but only worsened it by causing external bleeding. Naruto then started vomiting uncontrollably until he passed out from the pain, slowly, still whimpering and holding his stomach. Naruto at this point was openly crying, holding the places of his ghost pains, while the figure stared at him and the picture of Naruto lying in a pool of his own vomit and blood mixed, not even sure what to think other than 3 words whispered, "Oh my God." The figure took off silently back towards the meeting point made with her partner, silently sobbing for reasons she couldn't understand. But one thing was obvious: the years she spent with Orochimaru. All the experiments she was forced to watch and heal afterwards. All the times she watched and heard the sounds of torture. They were nothing compared to what she just witnessed. All that blood, all that pain she saw him suffer. It was unlike anything she'd seen even the king of sadists Orochimaru inflict. She couldn't understand why he would willingly watching it. So she left to inform Sasuke of what she saw in hopes of comfort, even though somewhere deep in her subconscious she knew she wouldn't get any. Meanwhile, Naruto was on his hands and knees, trembling before deciding to head back and try to collect Crimson Death. After a short while, Karin finally met an irritated Sasuke who wore his trademark scowl. Did you find anything, Karin? Sasuke noticed Karin shaking uncontrollably and couldn't help but wonder what she'd seen to make her act like that. After all, it isn't often someone who deals with Orochimaru is scared beyond their wits. Karin shakily nodded before she described her encounter with Naruto down to her description of Naruto. Sasuke for one was slightly shocked but hid it well. He didn't have time for petty things like pity, or maybe, a small, minuscule amount of regret. He had to find his weapon and get strong enough to face his brother. Karin, take me to where you found him. If he's here, he must be after my blade and we can't let a nobody have it. Karin looked slightly hesitant, but she squashed the hesitation almost immediately and replaced it with fiery determination. Hi Sasuke-kun. It was near the shoreline on the other side of the island. Sasuke immediately dashed off towards his goal with only the thought of getting his power and the side goal of finishing what he started at the Valley of the End. Naruto met up with Mikasa just outside his room. He had slept in the night before and immediately asked about getting Crimson Death. Mikasa answered with a sigh, yeah, today is the only day the calendar seal will unlock, so you do need to hurry and face the trials. But be warned, the last 2 trials must be finished before you can leave the room. I would go with you, but I must stay in order to keep an eye on. Mikasa stiffened with wide eyes before shoving Naruto along. Naruto was curious about the sudden change in character but was cut off by Mikasa. We must hurry, someone else found their way down here. Get into the vault and find the sword. I'll hold off any pursuers to buy you time. And know that if one of the 2 accepts the trials, you will be on your own to face them. Now go. Naruto started fighting back when he heard that though. Mikasa, what the hell? If it's that snake bastard Orochimaru, I want to crack at him. If it's Sasuke, I want to kick his patent Uchiha ass off my island and send any of his fangirls with him via my fucking boot. Mikasa ignored him however and shoved him into a large room with large intricate golden double doors with a red seal plastered holding the twin doors together. Mikasa then spoke to Naruto. I am going to buy you time. I know you want to help, but if they are down here they must be after the blade. From my research on it, there is a seal that permanently binds it to its wielder and thus loses the ability to be used by anyone else. You must make the blade yours before helping me, otherwise it may fall into the wrong hands. Naruto hesitantly nodded and let Mikasa seal the entrance. Naruto turned and approached the golden doors, and cut his hand to draw blood. Naruto let his hand bleed onto the seal before his wound closed. Naruto waited several seconds before a deep demonic voice echoed through the entire labyrinth. The blood of the offered has accepted the challenge. Your second trial has been complete. Offer yourself to the judgment of the Shinigami and claim your prize. The golden doors slowly opened with a loud creak until the large circular room was revealed. The walls were triangles that leaned inward to create a dome roof in triangle pattern with orange and red uzumaki swirls on each triangle. The floor was several layers of rings that rose in completely random locations around the room in a wave motion until the center with a raised platform with a statue of the Shinigami holding Crimson Death like one would, an offering being constantly protected by rings that surrounded it and rotated in every direction. Naruto stared out across the room from his current position outside the door before taking a deep breath and releasing it slowly. Alright, this is gonna suck. Wish me luck, furball. Naruto got a scoff in turn before Naruto waited for the large wave of rings to reach him before he leapt through the first wave and stopped on one of the few stationary rings and waited for the next faster wave to approach. Naruto let it pass a couple times, trying to time it right before leaping through to the next platform. Naruto couldn't go much further because a feminine voice interrupted his concentration. Wait, that sword is for Sasuke-kun. Don't touch it. Naruto turned to the source and saw the crimson hair of Karin and the scowl on her face, but hidden in her eyes was loneliness and a hint of pity he felt was directed towards him. Why would she pity him? Naruto shook himself from his thoughts. I knew it, the traitor is here. Well, tell him he's not getting whatever the hell he wants. Karin took a slightly angry position and leapt through the first wave before calling him out. I won't let you. Naruto paid close attention to the wave he currently faced and leapt through, just barely missing the edge. As the rings got smaller closer to the center, the waves got faster and harder to jump through without injury or chance of hitting one. Karin made it to the third platform while Naruto was on his fifth, just one jump away from his goal. He was about to jump when he heard the girl behind him shriek in pain, causing him to freeze and turn around. Naruto saw Karen lying on the platform with her left arm in the tracks of the wave, causing her arm to get crushed every time the rings came back down and letting out another pain-filled scream, occasionally screaming out for Sasuke. Naruto looked to the sword and back to Karen a few times before cursing under his breath and jumping back to the fourth platform and then the third to see Karen whimpering as her arm was crushed again and looked horribly mangled. Naruto acted fast and pried her arm from the tracks and picked up Karen bridal style. Karen looked up at Naruto with a mixture of gratitude and confusion while Naruto leapt through the waves back to the door. Why? Why did you save me? Naruto frowned. I can't stand it when anyone gets hurt, especially if they're just confused. If you trust me, I can try to heal your arm. Naruto landed at the entrance to the room and laid Karen on the ground with her arm out and reset properly. Karen was in so much pain she couldn't think straight. She knew Naruto was an enemy, but right now if he could heal her she would let him simply because she couldn't take the pain anymore. It felt like her arm was put through hell by having it continuously stepped on by a freaking biju then made into a pretzel. Naruto held his hands over Karen's arm and whispered, "Ocean gods, reviving wave." Golden water washed over her injury, causing her to release a silent scream before the pain in her arm dulled to a throb but left her feeling weak. Naruto stood up and quickly made his way back through to his goal, leaving Karen feeling like she failed her precious Sasuke-kun while Naruto made the final jump through the series of waves and reached the statue with the rotating reins. Naruto thought of how to retrieve the blade without losing an arm when the demonic voice from earlier rung through the room. Congratulations on progressing thus far. But for the true test that will decide your fate. The voice trailed off when the rings came to a sudden stop and the statue's eyes glowed red before it took hold of the handle of Crimson Death and held the sharp end towards Naruto. Offer your blood to the blade, let it drink and judge your worth. Naruto was scared, but using the sharp edge of the offered blade cut his palm open and ran it along the edge of the blade before the room went dark, leaving Naruto and the Shinigami statue. The blade glowed an ominous red and black aura before it glowed a bright golden, causing the statue's eyes to do the same. The statue then knelt down on a knee and presented the weapon to Naruto while the statue spoke in the demonic voice. My sword has accepted you as its master. You are the chosen one. Take my blade and reap the souls of your enemies. Use its power to fulfill your destiny. Use it however you see fit. Naruto stood stunned, but his arm moved on its own and gently gripped Crimson Death. Naruto picked it up while the room returned to full color, only the rings finally stopped moving. Naruto looked back to the statue to see it gone. Naruto moved to leave before he heard a familiar voice echo through the room. I see you've failed me, Karen, pity. You should see it as an honor to retrieve me my weapon of vengeance, Dobi. Through the shadows of the hall came Sasuke with an arrogant smirk firmly in place. Now be a good Dobi and hand it to me. Naruto stared at him indifferently before chuckling. Still the ever-arrogant Temei Uchiha? I don't owe you anything, you're in my home, my village, you can't demand anything here. Sasuke growled and drew his blade and lunged forward only to get knocked back by a ceiling barrier. Naruto laughed while Sasuke's growl got louder. What's so funny, Dobi? Naruto's laughter died down to a snicker. Apparently only those of Uzumaki blood can enter here. How does it feel that a now empty room denies a great Uchiha access to its secrets? Naruto stepped into the large cavern while Sasuke lunged forward, determined to cut him down, but is grabbed by a still weak Karen. Wait, Sasuke-kun. I've lost too much chakra. He talked to the Shinigami and saved me. Let's just leave, I don't want to see you hurt. Sasuke took that the wrong way if the snarl was anything to go by. Are you calling me weaker than the Dobi? Get off me, weakling, I have no need for such weakness. Sasuke finished his claim by throwing Karen to the tunnel where she gets back up and tries to get back to Sasuke with hurt evident in her eyes. Please Sasuke-kun, I can't take I. Splurge. Karen looked down to see a thin silver blade going through her chest. Eyes widened when Sasuke disappeared in a wisp of wind, indicating a genjutsu. Karen looked over her shoulder where her heart broke. There stood Sasuke staring at her with his Sharingan spinning wildly with the Magatama pupils. Karen felt darkness take her while Naruto grit his teeth and clenched his fists to the point his knuckles turned white. Why, you bastard? She cared about why you, and why you betrayed her. Red energy coated Crimson Death and bubbled angrily while Naruto held the sheath to his old weapon that turned midnight black, being covered in a black bubble. When the energy receded from the sheath, it revealed a black sheath with skull designs etched onto the sides with blood leaking out of eye sockets and mouths. A skull opened its mouth to allow the blade shelter with a black jewel in the right eye socket and a crimson in the other. Naruto looked at the sheath with interest before he sheathed the blade, which sang a melody that Naruto recognized, causing him to grin. Naruto watched Sasuke with anger mixed with excitement. Anger for how he treats people, and excitement for being the one to put him in his place, but before he could move, a clang of metal echoed in the room. Where once was Sasuke staring at Naruto irritated was now Sasuke blocked a massive sword strike from Naruto's distant cousin Mikasa Uzumaki. Mikasa looked much worse for wear. His clothes were tattered and he was bleeding extensively with a mile-wide grin like he was enjoying himself. His pupils were now upside-down crosses. Not taking his eyes off Sasuke, Mikasa spoke, "Hey cousin, your friend here knows quite a few dirty tricks. I hope you don't mind I take him on for round 2, cause I want some payback. Get the girl and get out of here, she's an Uzumaki." Naruto wanted to scream at him, but his words died in his throat when he saw the blood pooling around Karin, so he wasn't left with a choice. Naruto did a quick healing spell on her to stop the bleeding long enough to help get them away and pick her up bridal style. Naruto then took off down the tunnel, leaving Mikasa to Sasuke. Mikasa jumped back when Sasuke pushed with his blade and took a kendo stance. "I won't let you hurt my family." And that was such a cheap shot. Flashback. 20 minutes ago. After he left Naruto in the vault, Mikasa dashed towards the two approaching signatures to stop them from advancing any further. But then he had to jump out of the way from a fireball by ducking into a nearby turn in the corridor. A crimson blur moved past him, and one glance is all it took to tell it was another Uzumaki, but he focused on the black duck-but-haired teen standing before him. "Well, you're not how Naruto described Orochimaru, so you must be Sasuke. The one who stuck his fist through my little cousin's chest." The last part was spat out like it was poison. Sasuke merely smirked, "And what if I am? I'm an Uchiha. Do you really think you alone can beat me in a fight?" Mikasa smirked in response. "Boy, Naruto told me all about you and your goal. I even know about the massacre. I find it pathetic your clan was wiped out by a single man. If you want to get into whose clan is stronger, it took 3 of the major villages a whole 2 weeks to destroy my clan. You're nothing special. Just an arrogant brat." Sasuke in the meantime was fuming. How dare this commoner to insult his clan, then make up lies on how his clan was defeated. Insufferable. Sasuke lunged with eyes full of hate. His strike was parried by Mikasa and followed up by a kick to the jaw that sent him into the air. Mikasa leapt after Sasuke, aiming to stab him through the back, but Sasuke spun and parried the blade and tried to follow it up with a punch, but Mikasa tilted his head out of the way. Mikasa grabbed the offending limb and threw Sasuke back down to the ground and followed with his blade held overhead to cut Sasuke in half. Sasuke hit the ground on his back but rolled out of the way of the blade and stood. Mikasa got the blade stuck in the ground and had to leave it to avoid several shuriken. Mikasa widened his eyes in surprise when he saw a kunai fly right in front of his face with an explosive tag on it. Sasuke blew the tag and Mikasa was covered in smoke. But Sasuke didn't let up and went through hand signs and shouted, "Fire style. Phoenix flower jutsu." The attack exploded on impact and a crash was heard. Sasuke smirked but decided to line the corridor with explosive tags and leave. Sasuke never noticed Mikasa climb out of the rubble with a maniacal grin. Flashback end. Mikasa started them off by channeling chakra through his blade and shouted, "Uzukan. Great whirlpool break." Mikasa swung the blade in a circular motion over his head, releasing water chakra-powered slashes at Sasuke, who dodged. Sasuke dashed forward and slashed sideways at Mikasa, who leapt into the air and countered with a sideways kick that hit Sasuke in the face and sent him back a few feet, holding his now bleeding nose. Sasuke snarled and pushed his nose back into place with a sickening crack. Then went through another set of hand seals, fire style, dragon flame bullet. A decent-sized bullet of fire shaped like a dragon's head roared towards Mikasa and hit him in the chest before he could react. Mikasa went down into the vault, protecting him from any further attacks from Sasuke. Suddenly, without warning, Mikasa chuckled lightly and soon turned to full-on laughter. Sasuke looked irritated, so questioned the seemingly crazy Uzumaki, "What is your problem?" Mikasa took a deep breath, still chuckling before looking at Sasuke. "I succeeded in slowing you down long enough for Naruto to get to the shore. They are out of range of my sensory abilities, so that means they left the island. Chances are you'll never see that sword again, ha 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 hey ee hee hee." Mikasa exhaled slowly before letting darkness consume him, leaving an absolutely boiling Uchiha to rage and bang against the seal separating the two. Meanwhile, Naruto held Karin's whimpering form close while Naruto dashed off towards the mainland over top the ocean waves. Naruto ran for a good 10 minutes before seeing a boat not too far off and thought the sooner he healed Karin more thoroughly the better her chances of survival, so made his way towards the boat until he saw a familiar head of spiky white hair, causing him to freeze. Damn, if Ero Sennin sees me he'll drag me back to Konoha too soon. Maybe if I... Where do you think you're going? Again Naruto froze before he could move away. Jiraiya turned and darted towards Naruto after jumping off the boat. Naruto was hit in the back of the head by the pervert, who proceeded to crush him in a hug, surprisingly, ignoring the redhead in his arms' groans of protest until Jiraiya pulled back. Seeing the girl, Jiraiya looked at Naruto both furious and curious, but the look from Naruto saying, "I'll explain later," halted his speech. Jiraiya took the girl and examined her reopened wound. "Alright, I can take care of this, but you're lucky you found me when you did, otherwise this girl would die." Naruto glared at him and growled, "If I can find a place to set her down I would have taken care of her myself. After I'm done I'm leaving. If you keep heading for Uzushio you should run into a pissed off Uchiha. Tell Granny and Shizune it wasn't them that made me leave." Jiraiya looked defiant, if him crossing his arms was a clue. "Sorry Gaki, but I have to get you back home. If getting stronger is an issue then don't worry about it, by the time I'm done with you." Naruto cut him off heatedly. "You'll what? Train me to use Kyuubi's chakra and teach me control exercises I already know? Forget it, I've learned more away from the village than I have of my entire 13 years living there." Jiraiya snorted in amusement. "Oh yeah brat? What kind of jutsu have you learned?" Naruto smirked and held his hands over Karin's bleeding chest and whispered, "Ocean gods. Revival wave." The golden water covered Karin's chest and quickly healed it while washing away the blood. Jiraiya watched his godson in awe of his abilities. "What the hell is this? It's healing faster than Su-chan's mystical healing palm." Jiraiya shook himself from his stupor and began the questions. "I'm Gaki. Who taught you that jutsu? Where have you been, and why were you here?" Naruto stayed quiet until Karin shot up gasping for breath and coughed, indicating the end of the spell. Karin looked around trying to figure out where she was when she felt a hand pressed to her back comforting her. She was about to lung at the person she assumed was her Sasuke-kun, but decided to look first. She looked over her shoulder to see the deep blue eyes of Naruto and she was momentarily lost in them. She snapped out of her staring when Naruto spoke. "Are you okay, miss?" Naruto trailed off until Karin with a small blush pushed her red frame glasses back up her nose. "Karin." Naruto nodded. "Karin." Karin looked around trying to remember what happened until she remembered feeling pain in her chest and looking into Sasuke's Sharingan eye, causing her to burst out sobbing. Her Sasuke had tried to kill her, actually tried to kill her. She had sworn to do whatever it is he asked of her and he betrays her. That feeling of sadness was replaced with white-hot rage. She grit her teeth and clenched her fists so much her palms started to bleed and limbs began to tremble. Karin spoke in a deathly quiet voice that sent chills down the spine of both Naruto and Jiraiya. "That bastard. I give him everything. My body, my soul, my abilities, even my heart. And that bastard ripped it out of my chest." Her voice rose as her rant went on until Naruto tried to restrain her with an embrace around her arms which she struggled against. She was about to head but the person hugging her until his grip tightened and he jerked her still and tried to talk her down. "Calm down. We're heading back to the mainland. If you struggle too much you'll flip us overboard." Karin turned to push away but froze when her face was mere inches from Naruto's. She stared into his eyes again with a steadily rising blush until the sounds of scribbling and perverted giggling snapped her out of her funk. She calmed to the point she sighed in relief and whispered meekly, Thank you for saving me." Naruto released her from the hug much to Karin's disappointment and sat on the edge of the boat. "No problem. Sasuke is a Teme and now that you know, you can avoid him." Naruto stood and turned around. Now that my job's done, I'll be going. Just before he could move, Jiraiya gripped his shoulder while both Jiraiya and Karin said, "Wait." Naruto shrugged off his hand and jumped out onto the water. "I'm not going back, and you're not meeting my sensei. I won't tell you anything either." Jiraiya didn't like the answer, so tried to compromise. "Listen Gaki, if your sensei is teaching you right, then I'll back off if he sends monthly updates and notifies Tsunade when you're coming back." Naruto shook his head. "You don't understand, it's a matter that transcends mortal comprehension. A matter of the gods. And if you try to take me back, it would mean angering my sensei Oceanus, the ocean god." Jiraiya stared at Naruto blankly for a while before bursting out laughing, holding his stomach from how hard it hit. "Why, you actually expect me to believe you're being taught by a god? Bahaha, that's priceless Gaki, now seriously." Naruto allowed his eye to twitch in annoyance before taking a step forward. "Then fight me, I'll only use what I've learned since I left. If I win, you leave me alone; you win, I'll go back." Earning a scoff in return, but a confident smirk etched itself on Jiraiya's face. "Alright Gaki, but remember you asked for this." Jiraiya jumped from the boat and landed several feet from Naruto while taking a stance. Naruto takes his own practiced stance, and knowing full well to take Jiraiya seriously, Naruto charged magic to his fist, covering it in golden water, causing Jiraiya's eyes to narrow curiously. Meanwhile in the boat, Karin watched the feud and was interested, but thought it crazy like Jiraiya when Naruto said he was trained by a god. But when she saw his hand encased in golden water, she tried to sense it, and what she saw sent her into a state of awe. Naruto's chakra was so bright and warm, like a miniature sun. But where most chakra is blue, Naruto's was golden with streaks of silver. But when trying to go further, she felt dark, malevolent chakra, so vile and disgusting it sent shivers down her spine and terror gripped her heart. She wanted to crawl away and hide from the feeling. Back to the fight, Naruto took initiative and charged Jiraiya with his fist held level with his abdomen while his other held a kunai. Jiraiya smirked and dodged when Naruto punched, but his eyes widened when Naruto disappeared, only to exhale sharply when a sharp pain erupted from his back. Jiraiya heard Naruto shout, "Ocean gods, break down fist," and felt the name fit because his back now hurt like hell. But Naruto wasn't finished if his quick hand seals were anything to go on. Naruto threw shuriken at Jiraiya and called the technique, Shuriken Shadow Clone Jutsu. Jiraiya barely had time to react when he flew through his own seals and slammed his hands onto the ocean surface and shouted, "Water style! Water encampment wall!" The shuriken impacted the water with a thunk and dropped. What he wasn't expecting was the water he used, along with all water around, began to be sucked into Naruto's open mouth, causing Jiraiya's jaw to drop. In his shock, Jiraiya wasn't able to dodge when Naruto shouted, "Ocean gods, bellow!" The vortex of golden water impacted Jiraiya directly, causing him to be pushed through the water, leaving behind a divot in the ocean surface. Naruto stood panting while silently cursing himself for not focusing the magic enough for the more beam-like appearance. Naruto took notice of Jiraiya's absence and immediately went on guard. Even if he did surprise Jiraiya, it would take more than that to finish him off. Naruto felt something off about the water he stood on and immediately moved out of the way as white spikes burst from the surface, aiming to impale him. Naruto narrowed his eyes as Jiraiya burst from the water with a smile on his face. "I gotta say Gaki, that technique you used surprised me. If it were more focused, that woulda ended it." Naruto scowled but bit back, "Your wild lion's mane could have killed me too. Aren't you trying to bring me back? Not collect your reward from IWA?" Jiraiya stared at him confused before he laughed. "I'm not stupid enough to try to lie to IWA Gaki. If I said I had the son of the Yellow Flash, I'd be crucified, gutted, stuffed, and mounted on the IWA cage tower for such a lie." Jiraiya paused with a shrug. "I just figured from what I've seen you would survive. Glad I was right." Naruto stopped the conversation by charging him with another magic-powered punch, which Jiraiya was ready for now, so flipped Naruto away and spit a fireball at him. Naruto slammed his foot on the ocean surface, causing a large amount of water to rise, and shouted, "Ocean gods, great barrier!" The massive wall of water towered over Jiraiya, casting a menacing shadow, and snuffed out the fireball like a candle and began falling towards a freaked-out Jiraiya. Jiraiya thought fast and replaced himself with an oar from the boat nearby just as the wave hit. The waves caused by the impact pushed the boat away with Karin screaming and holding on to the edge. Jiraiya was beginning to get irritated with Naruto's stubbornness, so decided to charge his newest technique. Naruto watched from a distance as a glowing ball of chakra formed in Jiraiya's hand. Naruto grew a smirk when it started to grow in size until it was as big as the boat they were riding in. Naruto wanted to save this for later, but none of his other techniques could match the massive ball of destruction. Jiraiya smirked at his upcoming victory, but it turned into a frown when he saw Naruto create a Rasengan of his own. But the frown turned to his jaw dropping in awe when he sees Naruto now holding a massive wind-style Rasengan. Even he couldn't add an element to the Rasengan, it was too difficult. But his musings were cut short when Naruto came at him with the screeching ball of death in his hand. Jiraiya wasn't too keen about facing something like that with his imperfect Rasengan, but didn't have much of a choice, so charged to meet Naruto halfway. When the two attacks clashed, both Naruto and Jiraiya shouted in unison, "Giant Rasengan, Rasen Shuriken." After a short power struggle, Naruto's Rasen Shuriken cut through Jiraiya's technique and hit him square in the chest, causing him to scream in agony. The technique finished, Jiraiya shot backwards, spinning and hit the side of the boat, causing it to groan in protest. Karin didn't appreciate the hit either. "What the hell were you thinking, you idiot? You could have sunk us." Naruto sheepishly rubbed the back of his head with a chuckle until he heard the indignant scream of our favorite punching bag coming from the direction of Uzushio. Naruto turned to leave after putting Jiraiya back on the boat, but a hand grasping his sleeve stopped him and caused him to look back at a nervous and slightly scared Karin. Karin looked down, afraid of what she was about to ask of him, and took a deep breath. "See, can you take me with YU, please?" Naruto looked at Karin in slight irritation before saying, "I'm sorry, but no. My teacher doesn't take refugees." Karin started to cry and grabbed his forearm tightly like it was her lifeline and started begging, please take me with you. I'll die if Sasuke gets here and finds me. Sasuke will kill me, and if he doesn't, then Orochimaru will for me failing the mission. I'll do anything, just please, take me with you." Karin broke into tears of desperation, seriously playing Naruto's heartstrings until he released a sigh before turning around and bending over so she can climb onto his back. Karin squealed with happiness and launched herself onto his back and gripped his neck tightly, almost choking him. "Try to support your weight a little more on my right side, please. That last jutsu shredded my arm." And sure enough, Karin noticed the torn cloth with Naruto's arm completely covered in blood. Karin would have berated him if not for the closing in of her ex-crush, love interest. Naruto turned back towards Wave and dashed off. The final hour for the vortex to stay open was on. Naruto jumped through trees carrying Karin on his back, who was lost in feeling the warmth of his chakra. Karin suddenly stiffened and started whimpering, "He's coming." Those words were enough for Naruto as his speed increased to reach the bridge before he had to fight the Uchiha. After another 5 minutes, the duo finally reached their destination. Naruto's eyes widened in surprise of seeing Oceanus, but it was the woman next to him that made him cautious. Naruto ran to Oceanus, panting heavily, while Oceanus smiled proudly at him. Naruto looked towards Oceanus, surprised he knew, then towards the woman to examine her closer. The woman was beautiful with snow-white skin and silver hair like Kakashi, but instead of standing straight up, it flowed down towards her lower back while her bangs fall over her shoulders. Her eyes are black as night with no indication of pupils like an anti-Byakugan. Her dress was loose around her shoulders while the pure silver dress sparkled and shimmered. The woman stepped towards Karin and looked into Karin's eyes over Naruto's shoulder. Karin, on the other hand, was feeling uncomfortable being studied so closely. Was this how it felt to be researched on by Orochimaru? The woman stepped back next to her brother and offered a small bow. "Greetings, Naruto, Karin. My name is Tsukuyomi, goddess of the moon. I officially offer you, Karin Uzumaki, the honor of being my god slayer." The effect was immediate. Karin nodded incredibly fast without much thought of the consequences. Tsukuyomi smiled warmly at Karin and guided the two towards the edge of the bridge, where Karin was about to comment, but the killer intent that washed over them made them stop and look towards the source. There the group see a pissed-off Sasuke panting and heaving while sweating. Sasuke takes a step forward, snarling like an animal, You stole my weapon. I'm taking it back." Sasuke then looked at the two gods and smirked, "After I'm done with the two losers, you'll train me as a god slayer. I'm an Uchiha, a god amongst mortals. Sasuke looked towards the sounds of light laughing and giggling fueled on anger. Sasuke sees the two gods laughing, causing him to snarl. Oceanus raises his hand and swats it through the air like swatting a bug, and a hand made of water comes over the side of the bridge and swats Sasuke into the air and away from Wave Country. The gods can't hold back anymore, causing them to laugh heartily at Sasuke's expense, while Naruto and Karin look in the direction Sasuke went flying and wondered why the gods were laughing so hard. It was nearly impossible to make them laugh so hard. Meanwhile, with Sasuke flew through the air with a downward trajectory towards a moderately large building with a strange symbol hanging on a large wooden sign out front. Sasuke crashed through the roof, followed by the second floor flooring, then landing smack dab in the center of the room on his back. Sasuke hears whispers from around him but is too disoriented to understand much, but one phrase was recognizable. "I hope you can pay for the damages to my building." Sasuke closed his eyes and shook his head to get rid of the dizziness. "Sorry, but I don't have any money." Sasuke then shivered when he heard fairly feminine giggles alongside. "Oh shit." Sasuke's eyes snap wide open and look around to see half-naked men with female bartenders, stages set up all over the room, some with gulp beds, and a covered door frame with strange sounds coming from behind. Sasuke looked towards the owner, who had a slightly perverted grin on his face and started shaking in fear before everyone around him pounced to capture the poor Uchiha. He deserves this, am I right? The rest of the week would be the loudest and most horrifying week for the young Uchiha, who screamed so much his voice turned feminine. All straight men around the elemental went unbelievably quiet, like everyone was in mourning. Meanwhile, somewhere in another dimension, feminine giggles could be heard in a fairly large room with a wooden bar with a larger man dressed as a female. Said man appeared to be the source, if the meaty hand covering his mouth was any indication. My, it feels like something magical is happening, and I can't see it, it's too bad. Shiver. Note to self. Never, ever, ever write a scene like this again. Back with the actual story. Naruto looked over his shoulder to Karin indifferently. You ready? It's kinda a wild ride the first time it's done. Karin blushed at the words he used but giggled, causing a raised eyebrow from Naruto and a knowing look from Oceanus. Karin nodded and Naruto jumped, with Karin's grip on Naruto tightening to that of a sleeper hold. Nothing. That's what she felt. Absolutely nothing. Except the warmth of the one carrying her. Karin cracked open her eyes, and the moment she did, her other eye snapped open to join its twin. All around, stars, galaxies, streams of them. So beautiful. She felt weightless. Karin looked to Naruto, who took a glance back at her with a small smile. So Karin, what do you think? Pretty cool, isn't it? Karin was in her own little world, seeing everything reflect in Naruto's aquamarine orb until someone snapped a finger in her face, causing her to shake from her thoughts. Huh? Naruto chuckled while Tsukuyomi giggled. Naruto asked again, pretty cool, huh? This is like a hallway to pocket dimensions which connect our world to others. Did you know the Sage of Six Paths made something similar? Karin shook her head no but smiled. Yeah, this place is beautiful. What is this place anyway? Does it have a name? Naruto thought a moment before looking to Oceanus, who nodded in response. Because this place connects one world to another through dimensional travel, you can call it many things. But my personal name is the Dimensional Line. Though gods control where we go, mortals don't have that privilege unless accompanied by one of us, or the destination is preset. Karin nodded in understanding before something clicked. Wait, preset? You make it sound like we're in a machine. Oceanus chuckled before nodding. In some way we were. You see, it isn't possible for dimensional travel to be performed by godly power. It's one of the many laws of time, space, and reality. I'm surprised you caught that. Naruto here didn't in his first time, and hadn't been able to catch it until now. Karin blushed in embarrassment from the praise while Naruto gained a tick mark. Oi. What's that supposed to mean, you bastard? Oceanus laughed before it calmed to a chuckle. Nothing, Naruto. It's just your friend is a lot faster than you. Naruto sighed before tensing with a smile. Get ready for paradise, Karin. Karin wasn't sure what he was talking about until she was blinded by a flash of light, then revealing Oceanus' temple and Naruto's home. Karin's jaw gaped in awe of the temple, and the water of the ocean was so calm it should be considered unnatural. Naruto was right, this place is paradise. Meanwhile, Naruto looked back to Karin with a worried look. Are you able to stand? Karen tried to move her legs but found they felt incredibly weak, so she shook her head. I feel too weak, I lost a lot of blood, sorry. Naruto started walking towards the temple after adjusting his grip on the bend of Karen's knees. It's no problem, Karen-san. Karen lay her head on his back, just enjoying the ride until the scene changed to a thick forest with a path of sand cut through the center leading to large stone steps up into the temple, along the way being lit by braziers held to tall stone columns. It felt like this island held a mix of multiple different cultures' ideas of architecture that Karen found interesting. After the walk up the steps, the group came to a stone doors that held a swirling blue circle of strange markings with a blue swirl in the center, much like the Uzumaki clan's swirl, but this one closes the connection between ripples to make a full circle. Oceanus places his hand on the symbol and it glows a brighter shade of blue while the door slides up and out of the way to reveal something Karen wasn't expecting. Behind the door was a long marble hallway that split into 4 different directions near the end. On both sides of the hallway were doors that spread out 10 feet from each other, 10 on each side. All were a hazel brown with no distinguishable features from the others. The flooring was like the ocean outside, a calm water that had a full moon with fish visibly swimming underneath the surface like glass. The ceiling was a little unnerving though, because it reminded her of the way they got here. An upside-down river of black with lights twinkling with a full moon that showed a reflection on the floor. Karen just couldn't help but be surprised at how dedicated Oceanus and Tsukuyomi were to their elements. It's like everywhere you look you can see something that makes you think either ocean or moon. But the elegance of it all was breathtaking, and she would admit it if Naruto didn't start moving so suddenly. Oceanus looked to his sister, who nodded towards Karen and looked back to him expectantly. Oceanus sighed at the silent command before looking to Naruto. Make sure the girl is settled and let her rest for tonight. She'll be joining your training tomorrow morning. And by the way, your training has officially been doubled. I expected you back in half the time it took you. Naruto paled at not just an extra hour of training but double. He already spends his time from 3 in the morning to noon having his clones study and focus on chakra control while he does marathons around the island, while dodging and killing random sea creatures Oceanus creates to send after him with his katana. Oceanus chuckled before turning to walk away, thinking of new tour training regimes for his blonde pupil to survive, conquer. Tsukuyomi merely smiles warmly at the two and walks down the hall next to the hall her brother walked down. Naruto sighed in defeat before walking down the hall next to the one Tsukuyomi went down until he reached the 3rd door. He opened the door to reveal a spacious room with a large circular bed with silver sheets draped over the side. A portrait of a meteor shower in the background of a canyon hung over the headboard of the bed, and a simple nightstand on either side with a lamp. In the room was an open door that led to a bathroom. Naruto walked to the bed and turned around so Karen could slide off his back and onto the bed, where she processed to make herself comfortable. Naruto offered a disarming smile when he saw the girl acting nervous. If there's anything you need, let me know. Tsukuyomi-san should wake you up tomorrow and explain everything to you until you understand everything that being a god slayer entails. Now get some sleep. If your first couple weeks here are anything like mine, you're gonna need it. With that, Naruto left the room, leaving Karen simply staring at the ceiling, which she believed to be the night sky. It not even a few minutes of her head hitting the pillow, she fell into a dreamless sleep. Meanwhile, Naruto's room was a sandy beach, with his bed being a surprisingly comfortable sheet held between 2 palm trees. Honestly, the best sleep he ever had was in this bed. He lay and gently rocked from side to side while he listened to the waves, thinking of what will happen now. It wasn't often you rescued a fellow Uzumaki who by direct or indirect blood is related to you. It felt wonderful meeting not one but 2 of his fellow Uzumaki. He was just worried about Mikasa. He wasn't sure if Sasuke left him alive or had killed him. It was sad to think he left his family to die while he could have still done something. Yet he knew that if he had stayed, then Karen probably would have died instead from blood loss. Those type of situations suck royally. But it wasn't good to think such solemn thoughts, so decided to believe that Mikasa was still alive and he would meet him again someday. This is just a random thought I should have put earlier, but if I don't put it now I would forget it. Note: writing lines for arrogant pricks and mostly useless for everything besides cannon fodder fangirls are by far the easiest thing ever and the most fun to put to shame. Besides, there was more important things to worry about. Naruto finished these thoughts, pulling Crimson Death from its sheath and holding it up to the moon. Looking at the red stripe down the middle of the blade, he could have sworn he saw something vaguely similar to a person. It was forged by the Shinigami, probably a random spirit. Naruto lay the sword down in the sand and went to sleep, not noticing the warm red glow that emanated from the blade. The next morning Naruto had a rather rude awakening. He was having a very nice dream, sitting in his favorite ramen stand eating bowl after bowl of the heavenly broth with Ayame, Tuchi, Tsunade, and Shizune all sitting and laughing with him, each just talking and sharing funny experiences and stories, when he opens his eyes to the familiar glow of white sand. Rolling over, he sees the face of his sensei with an amused smile plastered on his face. Naruto gave him the finger, causing Oceanus to chuckle and walk back to the door of his beach. Naruto sat up with a quiet groan and supported his weight with one arm while his other lay lazily on his knee. He released a sigh and got to his feet after a while and made his way to the otherworldly kitchen he called a classroom. Opening the door, he sees at the table in the middle of the connected dining room Karin beaming at nothing, so he voiced his concern. Hey Karin, you feelin' alright? You seem a little too happy, what's up?" Karin blushed, but her smile never left while she responded, "I'm happy to be away from the pedophile. Do you have any idea what the Teme forced me to do? He had me experiment on anything he found interesting." Karin air quoted interesting, then had me watch him experiment on them and then heal those that survived. My chakra is now so high from being constantly drained that I can't even perform a simple bunshin anymore. Naruto gave Karin a sympathetic look and headed towards the kitchen, grabbing several herbs and spices along the way. "I'll fix up some breakfast as a way to say welcome." "So you said you healed the surviving experiments, does that mean you know medical ninjutsu?" Karin shook her head. "No, not that he could see," and began her explanation. "No, it's a bloodline I got from my parents. My chakra is unique. It allows those that suck out my chakra to heal all physical wounds instantaneously." Naruto turned to look at her in surprise with comically large eyes. "Wow, that's pretty cool." Naruto turned back to what he was doing, throwing what looked like shrimp into a sizzling frying pan. "But something like that has to come with some kind of consequence. How do they suck out chakra anyway?" Karin turned a bright shade of red of what she was about to say. Well, they have tea to bite me." Karin mumbled the last part. "Sorry, what?" Karin's blush grew twice as deep, putting her crimson locks to shame. "I said they have to bit me." That caused all action Naruto was doing to temporarily halt and turn to her, who had a look of shock. His shock turned into one of curiosity. "If you had to heal everyone like that every day, how many times were you bit?" Karin's blush disappeared instantly and was replaced with one of sadness and utter sorrow. "I don't even know anymore. That's why I cover my body so much." Naruto took on a look of confusion. "What does that have to do with anything?" Karin looked away from Naruto in shame before whispering so low that no one should have been able to hear it, "Because the bite marks left behind don't disappear. Ever." Everything went quiet until a comforting hand was placed on her shoulder, causing Karin to look back at the calming smile Naruto offered her. "It's nothing to be ashamed about. Why try to hide it? It means you've saved lives, Karin. Precious lives that could hold a higher purpose. This is one of the many lessons in learning under a god. Regard all life as your own, even if you must someday have to take it. Your marks are pendants for how many lives you've saved." Naruto let his words sink into the redhead until continuing, "Ocean God Slayer magic can be used for incredible healing. Think on what I said, and if you still want them gone, then I'll heal them." Naruto got a nod in response from a speechless Karin, so he went back to cooking. It was another 10 minutes before the food was ready, but Karin was hesitant in eating it. The dish was rather simple looking, but looked exotic. It was a plate of flat scrambled eggs with melted cheese, golden crusted shrimp spread around the egg with homemade cocktail sauce in a small cup to the side. Karin eyed it warily until a chuckle drew her attention to Naruto. "Sorry, it's not necessarily a breakfast dish. The shrimp didn't cook right for the original dish I was preparing, but luckily they cooked just right for this backup, and it's no use to waste good food." Karin nodded before pouring the cocktail sauce onto the eggs and shrimp and took a cautious bite, sampling the meal before her vision exploded white and an involuntary moan of bliss escaped her throat, causing Naruto chuckle. Next thing anyone notices, the plate of Karin's is cleaned off to the last crumb. Karin looked at Naruto with stars in her eyes. "Good Kami. How did you learn to cook like that?" I didn't even know you could mix cheese and cocktail sauce and get a result like that. Naruto went red from embarrassment of the praise when a chuckle drew both teens to an amused Oceanus. That would be me. One doesn't live for a millennia and not learn to cook food worthy of gods. He just happens to learn at breakneck speeds. Karen nodded while Naruto looked sheepish until he glared at him. You never did explain why the helio personality changes so fast. During training you're a dead serious slave driver. Half the time you're either serious or playful, then when I think I've figured you out you go and surprise me like what you did with the pedal lover. Oceanus shrugged. Perhaps my extended life and monitor over mortals with little interaction with anyone other than my sister has made me socially awkward. Maybe I'm insane? Maybe I have MPD? Who can tell? Naruto glared at him and was about to say something when Oceanus interrupted. Besides, you don't have room to talk. You're a clown in a life and death situation, and only serious when it either doesn't count half the time or when there is no need to be. My theory is you're bipolar. Naruto sagged in defeat and depression because he was right, earning a comforting pat on the back from Oceanus. Don't worry Naruto, I have a millennia of experience to fall back on in arguments. You're not the first to have tried. Naruto disappeared in a poof of smoke indicating he was a clone. Naruto is probably out on his favorite beach to practice using the new weapon. I'll take you there after you're finished eating. Karen nodded before going back for seconds. Oceanus had led Karen to a beach where Naruto ran through kata for his Kenjutsu style with his new blade. Karen was surprised to see a small army of clones running across the ocean surface, all balancing kunai on one part of their body or another. Karen also seen Tsukuyomi seemingly meditating. But the biggest noticeable difference between how things are and how they're supposed to be. It's 11 in the morning and the sky is covered in stars with no hint of the sun rising anytime soon. Karen looked at Oceanus expectantly and as if reading her mind began. This place is a dimension given to me and my sister to share. I control everything that connects to the sea including land while she controls everything that goes on in the sky. So together we work hand in hand to improve our god slayers so they act in a similar manner as we do. Increasing our teamwork and individual strength through mere presence. Oceanus paused to let his words sink before looking to Tsukuyomi. Her presence makes my tides stronger, while my tides give her something to latch onto, for a more focused attack. If her power guides my tides, then we are unmatched by all other than Kami herself. Now go to your teacher and begin your journey to power. Karen was smart, she really was. Heck, she would go as far to say the only one smarter than her was Orochimaru, as much as she loathed to admit it. But this was simply confusing. How can one person, being, thing, own a dimension and basically have Kami's control over it? Her head hurt from trying to find an explanation and just decided to follow Naruto's example and simply ignore the unusual, for now. Karen sat in front of the meditating Tsukuyomi and waited. She sat up straight when Tsukuyomi spoke in a calm teaching tone. Tell me Karen, what do you know of the moon? Karen thought for a moment to gather everything she knew about the topic. Well, from legends it was a way to seal the body of a rampaging monster in the time of the Rikudo Sennin. It also uses water to create waves from all liquids. Tsukuyomi nodded with a small smile. Those are both true. But what is rarely known about the moon is that it has a purpose. Look at the moon and relax. Let its light and influence wash over you and tell me what you feel. Karen did as instructed and stared at the beauty that lights the sky and let herself relax. Within minutes a strange calm settled over her. A peacefulness that she couldn't quite explain. It made her happy. It felt like her sins washed away from her skin. Karen looked back at a smiling Tsukuyomi. It feels amazing, I can't even describe it. Is this what you feel all the time, sensei? Tsukuyomi beamed at the title with a nod. Yes, very good Karen. That is exactly it. The presence of our magic is something that is used to help those around us. Be it healing, cleansing, protecting, giving light, etc. It's us and the way it makes us feel that give us power. As long as you are protecting someone or something precious, you will always be at your most powerful. Karen smiled at the words of her sensei when Tsukuyomi turned serious, however. Currently you aren't able to harness that power. First I'll have to teach you about magic like Naruto over there started. After my explanation and you learn to draw magic, we'll start you on other things with him. Karen nodded in understanding while Tsukuyomi began her lecture on magic, how it's produced, used, etc. Meanwhile, Naruto flew through the second step of his style named the Ocean's Impact. Holding the sword inverted behind the user and rushing forward with a sideways swipe will add extra power and speed to the attack and can be used on multiple targets using whirlpool movements. The step is taxing on stamina, but if he was going to progress further in the Kinden no Kyo no Mei Forbidden Ocean's Dance, then he was going to need to work harder and learn the other two kata while mastering his current two. After he had started training after his switch with a Kage Bunshin, Shadow Clone, this morning after his talk with Karin he spent the 3 hours assigned to him by Oceanus working on the Ocean's Impact or North Sea. He had just finished up and was panting lightly. Naruto looked towards Karin and smiled. The lesson he learned was whenever one of them chose a god slayer the other would choose one to follow shortly. This was done with a purpose. Being, relatively speaking, twin gods, that meant they always had to have two god slayers learn their magic so they can stick together. So it was most often done during the training period so the junior god slayers could learn more about the other and safely acclimate to have natural teamwork when fighting as a team. So both are taught to spend as much free time together as possible to learn more about one another. Oceanus saw where Naruto was looking and smiled softly. He was proud of the boy thus far, by far the strongest will he ever had the honor of strengthening. His lessons were being soaked up like a sponge. His clones were quickly improving his chakra control and making an easily noticeable impact on his intelligence. The boy just continues to grow stronger with each passing day. Even when one of the boy's projects blows up in his face quite literally. Oceanus chuckled at the memory of Naruto learning to add his wind element to the Rasengan. Flashback. Naruto, I believe it is time for you to finish the Rasengan. Oceanus had been watching Naruto improve on his wind manipulation and feels that the time has finally come. In actuality, Naruto mastered cutting a waterfall in half a week ago, and the previous week has been to improve any holes. Naruto turned from the waterfall dressed in only orange boxers soaked in water from the pillar of water he's been using as a substitute for an actual waterfall. Naruto gave a mock salute and jumped from a large stone platform 50 feet in the air and landed in a crouch in front of Oceanus. We'll begin on the beach. Oceanus wasted little time in making his way to the beach with Naruto in tow. Naruto was rather excited. Finally, after working on wind manipulation for so long, he was finally able to work on the final step of the Rasengan. The step that even the Yondaime couldn't complete. So without much else needing to be said, Naruto made 100 clones and they each went on to try creating the wind elemental variant of the Rasengan. Channeling wind-natured chakra into a neutral-natured chakra Rasengan was definitely one of the harder aspects of chakra control. But after a couple hours of trial and error with a couple explosions and several hundred replacement clones as well as an extra 4 hours spent filling in the 10-meter holes in the earth, Naruto finally made progress. The weakest sound of screeching could be heard from a clone with a pale blue Rasengan in hand with 4 pin-like blades slowly rotating around the sphere. All the clones gave a whoop of victory while the clones that succeeded poofed in a cloud of smoke, causing a sense of realization in the crowd. With the added knowledge of what needed to be done, the clones got to work once again, this time with screeching being heard all across the island. Naruto had finished for the day and was happy with the progress he had made with the wind variant Rasengan, if the weak smile was anything to go by. He was definitely happy he made progress, but something he noticed was he wasn't physically changing. Sure, he lost most of the body fat and was replaced with muscle, but ever since he started training and eating right, he started doing physical examinations of himself. Nothing advanced, but small stuff like measuring his height and comparing it to the last test taken, the speed he could run a mile, how many push-ups, chin-ups, sit-ups he could do. Little things like that, and it was his height that concerned him. After spending as long as he had here, he hadn't grown as fast as he was supposed to. So with his concerns he went to question Oceanus. Well, Naruto, it's nothing that needs to be worried about. You're growing at the right pace, it's just time doesn't flow here like it does in the elemental nations. So your body is adjusted to that time while we move faster here. It's why you're much smarter and stronger than children your age while your body hasn't caught up yet. The response was hard to understand for anyone who didn't understand dimensional theory. So for a year in this dimension would be only about 2 weeks in any other. That's the beauty of pocket dimensions, they all share the same stream of time because they are branches of the trunk or main dimensions. Pocket dimensions are like the leaves of a tree. They use energy outside of reality to create a reality, flow of time, and space for creation. Thus, pocket dimensions have much more energy and a faster flow of time. The explanation gave Naruto a major headache, so he marked it off as something too complex for him to understand and left it alone. But he did manage to understand time flies faster here than it does where he's from, so he was happy. It took a while for Naruto's training to make major progress, but the ear-wrenching screech that sounded was more than enough to say he did make progress. Oceanus looked on with pride as the mass of chakra took shape of a white shuriken with a single blue orb in the center. Sure, the sound was painful, but even he had to admit that if he was struck with such an attack it would definitely leave a nasty mark. Naruto hollered in excitement as he charged towards a boulder and struck. The explosion that followed was impressive, but he immediately got worried when he noticed a bit of red in the explosion. With the explosion dying down, all that was left of the boulder was gray dust spread out across the sand. But Naruto was in bad shape. The entire right side of his body was cut to hell. Blood ran from every wound, making it seem like he was dipped in red paint. Flashback end. That was a day he wouldn't forget. The day Naruto learned to wait for permission and advice before using an untested orb of destruction that even when incomplete can blow off a tree. Yep, Naruto literally got the moron blown out of him. It was an amusing sight whenever Naruto learns a new spell or jutsu. Since his incident, Naruto had been utterly terrified whenever he was instructed to perform a new attack. So to help ease his own fear, Naruto consulted Oceanus beforehand, so he had the support from his sensei. So it was nice to see how well Naruto learns from his mistakes, as well as learning to think things through more while keeping his bright, energetic personality. But enough about past mistakes, it was about time to call it a day. Naruto, you've been training for a good portion of the day, go on inside and start dinner. Time skip. 3 years later, pocket dimension time, 1 year elemental nations time. The years spent with Oceanus, Karin, and Tsukuyomi were incredibly productive, being Naruto became much faster, stronger, and smarter. He overcame his fear of experimentation but was careful when he did. And from his research into magic and chakra, he's been preparing himself for another experiment, but he needs to combine both his chakra and his magic in order to start. Karin had blossomed under Tsukuyomi's care. With her already stupidly high aptitude for learning, she was faster at learning how to use magic. And although her magic wasn't as destructive or powerful as Naruto's, she was anything but powerless. And due to her and Naruto spending so much time together, Karin and Naruto became very close, and although it was currently one-sided, Karin had developed a small crush on Naruto. Now it wasn't to the point she would follow him like a lost puppy trying to get in his pants like she had done with Sasuke. That ship had sailed in a direction that nearly cost her life if it hadn't been for Naruto. And that crush grew when she thought about the day Naruto had removed the marks from her past. He had removed the bite marks that showed her old life with Orochimaru and Sasuke. But it was around this time that Oceanus had approached Naruto of performing the steps necessary for removing that mental block that restricts the flow of magic. Yes, it was time to merge magic and chakra. Naruto sit lotus position on the end of the dock waiting for Oceanus to come, with Karin sitting at his side. Naruto was nervous, very nervous. He still remembers the time he had questioned Oceanus on the possibility of merging the two energies earlier. Death by energy overflow is not something he wanted to experience. When Oceanus came, he placed a comforting hand on Naruto's shoulder. Are you ready, Naruto? Be warned, when we start this must be finished, otherwise you will die. Once the blockage is destroyed, you will only have one chance of merging your two energies. Naruto took a deep breath when he looked to Karin, who gripped his arm comfortingly and giving him a supportive smile with a small pink hue dusting her cheeks. Naruto returned the smile and nodded to Oceanus. Oceanus straightened and crossed his arms. You must go into your mindscape and connect chakra directly to your magical core. Then you must navigate the passages of your mind which are connected to your chakra coils. You must travel with the flow of your chakra and complete the connection. Now be careful. Naruto nodded and began his descent into his mindscape. Naruto opened his eyes to find himself in the familiar dank sewer that was his mind, seeing the large cage that represented the seal holding Kyuubi, and the golden orb of energy that represented his magical energy. Naruto sees Kyuubi's red eyes watching him from the darkness of his cage but ignores him and heads straight to the golden orb of energy. Naruto brought his hand towards the ball of energy and just before it touched sent chakra to his palm and connected it to the orb of energy. All at once images filled Naruto's head. Times in his life he was both happy and sad, protected and hurt. But he pushes them to the side and focuses on his journey. The corridors he maneuvered through were varied. Some list all water and looked to be in great shape, representing some of the good times he's had in his life. While others are even worse than in the seal, cracks running along the walls and floor. Water that reached his knees and lights that were broken and or dim, obviously representing the much worse memories of his childhood. What made the experience worse was the fact he was forced to relive every memory that he passed, both good and bad. Along the way a pipe that ran along the floor followed Naruto through the journey. Having connected his chakra with the magical source, he was manually creating a magical network through his body. Oceanus' theory was after the connection was complete the new pipe would eventually merge with the proper pipe on its own if the direction traveled was correct. After what felt like an eternity reliving his entire life, Naruto reached the core of his chakra network, which was a series of generators running and humming with power constantly expanding his chakra coils. In the center of the large room was a massive boiler that he assumed represented his overall chakra reserves. His theory was supported with the 3 pipes currently connected to the top and bottom of the boiler. 2 pipes were blue while the third was red. Naruto approached the boiler and saw several places to allow more pipes to connect. He approached one closer to the pipe he felt was the pipe that circulated the way Naruto traveled and channeled chakra to his hand again and touched the connector. All at once the pipe connects and a new sensation floods his system. Those outside watching see a silver aura explode outward from Naruto like a raging inferno. Meanwhile Naruto is watching something that will change his life forever. Flashback. Night of birth. Light, blinding light, that was all he could see. He heard whispers, he felt a comforting warmth he wasn't used to, the calming voice of someone he never met, yet, somehow felt familiar. Then hair, crimson hair filled his vision, and the coo of a woman in his ear. Hello Sochi. I'm your mama, Databane. Sorry guys but I'm feeling lazy for this, so look up Kushina's flashback to Naruto's birth or watch anime. This would take far too long even if it is important for what's about to happen. You will be angry if you don't understand, so please look up. Flashback end. Tears stung his eyes, anger and sorrow. He was there, he watched as they died. And now he can't stop thinking about it. The blood that flowed from his mother's mouth as she spoke her final words to him. The look of guilt his father had on his face, it hurt. He felt like he was right there but couldn't do anything. Naruto's eyes stung as tears finally broke and a painful scream ripped from his throat. Helpless to the memory being played to him again and again, the claw of the Kyuubi impaling his mother and father as they protected him from harm. Then with a final scream and flare of energy Naruto left his mindscape. They were expecting many things from Naruto, a whoop of victory and achievement, even a bone-crushing hug. But what they weren't expecting was the scream that ripped from his throat, causing Karin to jump in surprise while Oceanus watched untensed. Naruto's power pulsed outward, causing Oceanus' eyes to widen in surprise, leaving him open when Naruto shouted, Shinra Tensei. Subjugation of the omnipresent god. The sudden burst of power crushed the dock and created a dome-shaped indent in the ocean 20 meters across, 10 feet deep. Karin was knocked back to the beach with the force and Oceanus was pushed back. Naruto's float just above the water with his hair shadowing his eyes. When Naruto looks up, Oceanus remains impassive when he sees Naruto with a small pupil with 4 metallic rings surrounding the pupil, the whites of his eyes now gold. Naruto.
That's all for now. If you want to see next part, then please like this video and subscribe my channel. Thank you.